Hi guys, tonight we step quietly into the snow-packed streets of 1900s America, where your breath curls into the cold and the city hums in a way that feels familiar, yet so far removed from anything you have lived. You feel the sting of winter on your cheeks as you duck between horse-drawn carriages and streetcars buzzing along rails that spark under iron wheels. There is an early electric glow in some windows, but it is faint and flickering, nothing like the neon-soaked nights you know. And yes, as you settle into this world, you probably will not survive the century-level germs that drift around you. So thank goodness this is only a bedtime stroll. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to make this little time travel experiment cozier, drop your location and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights. You step forward as the story folds around you, and the first flakes of a lazy December snowfall begin to rest on your coat. A street lamp hisses with escaping gas, giving off a warm orange halo that makes everything feel a little softer, even though the wind bites through every layer you think is adequate. It smells of ash, snow, coal, smoke from thousands of chimneys, and something sweet drifting from a bakery that refuses to close this early in the evening. The mix is strangely soothing, and as you walk, your stride slows into a sleepier rhythm. It is the turn of the century. America is expanding, reforming, arguing with itself, and building upward with steel. Cities like New York, Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia vibrate with energy. Yet at this moment, on this quieting winter night, a deep calm settles between buildings. Christmas is coming, and people everywhere are preparing in ways you might recognize and in ways that might surprise you. The mainstream historical fact here is that urban populations are exploding. Millions of new residents, including many recent immigrants, have changed the entire soundscape of these streets. That is why every direction you turn you hear a different accent, a different melody, a different version of December hope. A carriage rattles past you with tired horses. Their manes are frosted white. They seem as ready as you are to call it a night. Their driver calls out to you in a tone that suggests you should not be walking alone on such icy cobblestones. You ignore him gently and keep strolling because there is something magical about seeing the city wind down at a time before electric glow chased away every shadow. You pass a newsboy who is still shouting headlines despite the cold drilling into his lungs. His hands are raw and red, and he shakes each paper to show it is crisp and worth your nickel. He grins at you as if you are the first customer he has seen in hours. You buy one out of kindness, and warmth flickers through you when you see his smile widen. He pockets the coin with the speed of someone who knows exactly how dangerous it is to show what he carries. The quirky tidbit here is that some newspapers sold special Christmas editions filled with sentimental stories and over-the-top poems that almost nobody took seriously. They were meant to stir hearts and purse strings at the same time. You wander on. Buildings rise above you like dark cliffs of brick and stone. The windows glow with hints of life. Behind them, families decorate trees, peel potatoes, scrub floors, or argue about spending limits for gifts. You do not hear them, but you imagine their worlds layered above you like a towering dollhouse. As you take another careful step, your breath fogs the air in dramatic clouds. The cold seems to sharpen your senses. You notice the scratchy feel of your wool coat, the crunch of packed snow underfoot, the metallic scent of tram rails, and the faint hum of electricity from a line strung overhead. But not every street has that new wonder yet. In fact, historians still argue whether Christmas in the year 1900 felt more old-fashioned than festive, because many communities still relied entirely on gaslights and candles. The population was in transition, caught halfway between comfort and risk. Every spark held promise, but also danger. A man selling roasted chestnuts lifts the lid of his cart. Steam billows into the air in silky clouds. He nods at you silently, his eyes soft with exhaustion, and hope that he might sell a few more bags before he heads home. The chestnuts crackle, their smell instantly inviting. You buy some and warm your hands on the small paper sleeve. It burns a little, but in a way that feels delightful compared to the ice creeping into your bones. You cross the street to avoid a streetcar grinding to a stop. The conductor rings a bell that echoes between the narrow lanes. Commuters spill out coats, flapping boots, slipping hats pulled down low. You catch snippets of chatter about work, about long hours, about the holiday rush. Some sound excited for Christmas. Others sound like the holiday is just another day sandwiched between shifts. You walk past a row of brownstones that look nearly identical, though each one holds a completely different life. A small boy presses his face to a frosted window pane watching the snowfall, as if each flake carries a secret. You give him a small wave and he beams back. That single moment adds a gentle lightness to the air. Around the corner, the scenery changes. Tenement blocks crowd close and laundry lines sway stiffly in the wind like frozen ribbons. People here are doing what they can to prepare for Christmas, but money is thin and time even thinner. You feel the weight of their resilience and the quiet pride that keeps them going day after day. Even in this early section of your wandering, you see how unevenly holiday cheer settles across the city. A street singer wrapped in too few layers stands under a lamp trying to keep her voice steady. She hums a familiar carol. Her tune floats upward and softens the street. You pause, letting the music rest in your chest for a moment before you drop a coin into her cup. She nods, but keeps singing. Sometimes acknowledgement is easier than conversation. You take in the entire scene and feel yourself growing sleepier. The cold drifts through your muscles, slowing you, making the world dreamlike. Snowflakes tumble lazily now, gathering on railing tops and coach shoulders. The city seems half awake, half dreaming. Much like you. Your journey here is just beginning, and already the textures and scents of this place settle over you like a heavy quilt. Christmas in 1900. America is far from simple, but it is warm in its own rough-edged way, and as you step deeper into the snowy street, the story moves with you, ready to show you more of what this world holds. You continue down the quieting street until the glow of a general store pulls you in like a beacon. The windows are fogged from the heat inside, and you swipe a circle with your glove just to peek through. Shelves line every wall, and the place glitters gently with tin glass and paper labels instead of the plastic shine you know from modern shops. It feels humble and earnest, as if every object is placed with intention. You push the door open, and a bell jingles with a tired little ring that sounds exactly like a store that has stayed open an hour too long. Warm air rushes around you, smelling of kerosene ginger candies and the dusty scent of muslin cloth. Inside, you move slowly as if the floorboards might squeak your presence into the quiet scene. A young clerk stands behind the counter, trying to stay alert. His sleeves are rolled up, though the room is hardly warm enough for that. A pot-bellied stove in the corner clinks as it expands and contracts. That sound becomes part of the store's heartbeat. You nod hello at the clerk, and he offers a polite smile that says he's grateful for company, even if you are not buying much. Your eyes drift along the shelves. Christmas in 1900s. America is defined by simplicity and practicality, and this is exactly where you see it most clearly. The mainstream historical fact here is that general stores served as the central hub of rural and small-town shopping. Even in cities, smaller shops like this held on tightly because they supplied everything from ink to spices to socks. And during December, they filled their windows with just enough holiday spirit to keep customers feeling hopeful. You pick up a small tin of peppermint drops. The lid rattles softly. The candies inside are cloudy, imperfect, more handmade in appearance than the sterile plastic-wrapped sweets you know. Nearby, you see oranges stacked in a neat little pyramid. Their bright skins glow like suns in the dim light. Receiving a single orange as a gift was not unusual in 1900, especially for children who rarely tasted fresh fruit in winter. You almost laugh imagining a modern kid unwrapping one under the tree, but here that simple gift carried genuine excitement. Further down the aisle you find a set of wooden toys, horses with chipped paint, tiny trains that clatter along simple tracks, dolls with unblinking painted eyes. Most are modest in scale because materials were expensive and mass production, though growing, had not yet flooded the market with abundance. You run a finger along the edge of a carved spinning top. The wood is smooth and warm from the room. For a moment you imagine a child gripping it with awe on Christmas morning. A quirky little detail catches your eye. On a high shelf sits a box labelled Mechanical Wonder. Inside is a wind-up metal frog that hops in a surprisingly chaotic pattern. It looks like a toy one might lose under furniture immediately. These pocket-sized novelties appeared in shops around the turn of the century and became prized treats. They were silly, delicate, and often broke within days, but they delighted children who rarely owned anything purely for fun. You wander deeper into the store and notice the clerk watching you with curiosity. Maybe he wonders why you seem so fascinated by ordinary items. Maybe he guesses you are not from around here. He dusts off a crate and begins opening new stock. You peek over and spot more Christmas goods, pine-scented soaps, knitted mittens folded into pairs, pocket mirrors, and even a few fabric ribbons for decorating trees or gifts. They feel small and intimate, far removed from oversized modern displays. A woman enters behind you, carrying a basket she clearly brought from home. She moves quickly, selecting flour, sugar, and a handful of spices. Cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger. She's probably baking for the holiday feast. Her hands move with practiced speed and her breath fogs each time she exhales. She glances at you once, nods in friendly acknowledgement, then turns right back to her task. People in this era do not often waste time on idle chatter in shops. Work is waiting at home. You drift toward the counter and notice a faded sign advertising early mail order services. Sears and Montgomery Ward, the giants of this new kind of shopping, could deliver everything from bicycles to baby clothes. But in small stores like this, one catalogue shopping still felt like a marvel. The clerk explains that families often browse thick booklets together by lamplight, circling items they hope to afford someday. Historians still argue whether mail-order catalogues helped knit the nation together or whether they contributed to the decline of the local stores like this one. You glance around the warm, cramped room and know exactly which perspective the clerk might lean toward. A child tugs gently on your coat. When you look down, he points at a glass jar filled with brightly wrapped hard candies. His eyes shine with determination. You realize he's trying to signal that he is too short to reach it. He is not asking verbally. It is more of a quiet plea. You lift the jar and he beams as if you handed him a treasure chest. His mother scolds him gently from across the aisle, but her voice softens when she sees how small his chosen candy is. She pays for it with a single coin. The boy unwraps it instantly and the smell of wintergreen floats past you. You wander over to a wooden crate near the exit. Inside are dusty glass ornaments that look delicate enough to shatter under a sneeze. They are hand-blown and imperfect. A few have air bubbles trapped inside or stripes that lean crookedly. People treasured these fragile decorations, often buying only one or two each year. The thought of accumulating a collection piece by piece feels soothing, like building a life rather than buying one all at once. The clerk sees your interest and mentions that some families still prefer handmade paper chains for trimming the tree. He shows you a small pile of coloured paper strips. They are so thin and slightly faded at the edges, yet charming in their simplicity. He explains that children often spent evenings creating them at the kitchen table, linking each strip with glue made from flour and water. You imagine sticky fingers, laughter, the glow of lamplight bouncing off tiny faces. A gentle hush fills the room now that the outside wind has softened. People move slower, as if the night itself is coaxing them to breathe. You feel the weight of sleep tugging at your shoulders. Looking around this store, you realize how intimacy defined the holiday season here. Few things were extravagant. Most were chosen out of care, usefulness, or the hope of making someone smile. You thank the clerk. He tips his head politely, then reaches behind the counter and hands you a single wrapped caramel. It feels like the kind of gesture people forget to make in hurried eras. You tuck it into your pocket and know you will remember this warmth much longer than the sweetness itself. As you step back out into the snow, the bell jingles behind you, and the city air closes around you again. The store's glow fades as the door shuts, but its memory stays with you like a lingering ember. Ahead, the night stretches out, and your path leads toward the woods at the edge of town where families wander in search of the perfect evergreen. You follow a narrow road that guides you toward the colder outskirts of town, the place where street lamps give up and moonlight takes over. The snow beneath your boots grows thicker and quieter, turning each step into a muffled whisper. Ahead, the silhouettes of families move like patient shadows across the white landscape. They carry saws, ropes, woven baskets, and lanterns whose glow bobbles gently as if the night itself is breathing. You realize you have arrived at an annual ritual that feels far older than the century you're visiting. Tonight, people are searching for their Christmas trees, not in organized tree farms, but in the wild. Your breath fogs around you as you join the slow procession into the woods. These forests are not tailored or manicured. Branches bend low with the weight of snow. The air smells crisp and earthy with a hint of evergreen sharpness that refreshes your lungs. A soft hush falls over everyone the moment the trees close in around you. It is the kind of quiet that feels sacred even if no one says so aloud. The mainstream historical fact here is that in 1900s, America, many households still cut their own trees rather than buying them in town. Tree lots existed, but the tradition of hunting for the perfect pine remained strong across rural and suburban communities. A little girl trots ahead of her family, her wool coat dusted with fresh flakes, her boots disappearing in deep drifts. She points eagerly at a scrawny tree leaning sideways under the weight of uneven branches. Her father shakes his head gently. You can sense the negotiation even without hearing the words. The girl wants a tree that looks magical to her. The father wants one that fits in the parlour without scraping the ceiling or costing him a sore back. The mother stands somewhere in the middle, tilting her head, as if imagining garlands and candles already draped across the crooked limbs. You pause near a cluster of fir trees. They rise tall and straight, their needles shimmering where moonlight finds them. You brush your hand against a low branch. Snow falls in a soft puff, releasing a richer scent of resin and winter. It feels grounding, a reminder that Christmas once meant stepping directly into nature rather than browsing aisles of identical options. Deeper into the woods, you see a man holding a lantern high. He calls softly for his sons. A moment later, they appear dragging a sled with a modest tree laid across it. The boys look triumphant, their cheeks pink from the cold. The father lifts the tree at one end and examines it with approval. Not too tall, not too thin, and just enough space between branches to hold homemade ornaments. It is funny how few people in this era worry about symmetry. What matters most is the life the tree carries into the house. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind as you watch another family debate between two options. Some households in 1900s America actually preferred very sparse trees. With gaps between branches, candles could be clipped on without burning nearby greenery. Imagine lighting real fire near dry pine and trusting that everything will be fine. It sounds absurd to modern ears, but generations managed it with careful supervision and a good bucket of sand nearby. You feel a tiny jolt of alarm just thinking about it. The snow begins falling more steadily now, wrapping the forest in a muffled cocoon. Lanterns glow like warm planets drifting through the trees. The air becomes thicker with the scent of pine. You notice how many people take long pauses before choosing. They run gloved fingers down bark, gently shake branches to test needle strength, or circle a tree several times like artists contemplating a blank canvas. The selection of a Christmas tree here is slow and intentional, not rushed by crowds or timers. You walk along a narrow trail where your boots sink with each step. A couple stands beside a tiny scraggly tree. It is barely more than a sapling with lopsided branches. The woman laughs softly, while the man looks doubtful. After a moment, she tucks her arm into his and whispers something that softens his entire face. They cut the little tree together, and you realize that sometimes the sentimental ones win. Your lantern flickers slightly as you move toward a clearing. Snow drifts sideways in a gentle sweep, and the wind makes a soft rustling through the pines, almost like the trees are whispering to one another. The quiet becomes so complete that you can hear the faint crunch of distant footsteps, the rhythmic rasp of saws biting through trunks, and the occasional burst of excited laughter from children who have found the one. It feels timeless, like you could linger here until morning. Near the clearing, two men discuss whether a certain tree grew too close to others to be shaped properly. Their debate is friendly but passionate. This is where the open, scholarly dispute slips naturally into the scene. Historians still argue whether early Americans saw tree cutting as a simple necessity, or as a ceremonial moment of bonding. Some diaries describe it with reverence, others treat it like a chore. Watching the families here, you suspect the truth lived somewhere in between, shifting from house to house, shaped by mood weather, and the simple need to bring a bit of green inside a winter-worn home. A dog barks joyfully and dashes between drifts. He sniffs every stump he passes as if making a personal survey of the forest activity. Children chase after him, slipping and squealing as they tumble into soft piles of snow. Their parents pretend not to worry, but you catch the sharp breath of a mother when one child gets too close to a steep bank. A gentle shout brings him back to safety. You notice the lantern light catching on ice crystals clinging to branches above you. The forest sparkles subtly like the world is decorated before anyone touches it. You tilt your head and listen to the delicate crackle of settling snow. Nature performs its own quiet pageantry here. Farther ahead, a family is tying their chosen tree with a rope. The father pulls it securely while his teenage daughter steadies it. The mother wraps the rope into a neat coil around the sled, knotting it with practiced hands. They begin the slow trek back toward the town. You can feel the satisfaction radiating from them. The tree is not perfect. It leans slightly and one side is sparser than the other, yet it feels right. It is theirs. You take one more slow walk through the pines, letting the cold seep gently into your bones, making your steps heavier and dreamier. The snow keeps falling in soft hypnotic sheets. Your thoughts soften with it. The air feels quieter now, as if the forest knows your visit is almost over. Families begin drifting out of the woods, their lanterns bobbing away like sleepy fireflies. The crunch of their footsteps fades. The path back to town glimmers with faint light. You follow it, feeling the transition from wilderness to human warmth. Ahead, the glow of windows brightens, promising fires chatter and the gentle work of turning these imperfect trees into symbols of celebration. You step forward, letting the forest fall behind you, As the night guides you toward the parlour rooms where the real transformation begins, you step back into town with your boots softened by snowmelt and your hands tinged with the scent of pine. Windows glow brighter now, carrying that golden shimmer that means families have begun transforming their parlour rooms into holiday sanctuaries. You drift toward one such home, guided not by invitation but by the gentle pull of lamplight on lace curtains. The house is modest, its porch slightly crooked, but warmth spills from the seams the way breath escapes a sleeping child. You tap the snow from your coat and step inside, moving into a world where the everyday bends slowly toward Christmas. The parlour greets you with a hush. The furniture is rearranged with deliberate effort, as if space has been carved out for something sacred. Thick curtains are drawn to keep out the cold, and the room glows with a soft amber cast from a kerosene lamp on a table. A family has placed their freshly cut tree in a corner, leaning it against the wall while the father tightens the stand. There is no metal contraption from the future, only a wooden cross brace wrapped in cloth to keep the trunk steady. Even watching him wrestle with the tree reminds you that holidays here demand physical labour before beauty can bloom. A mother smooths a hand over her apron before lifting a box from a shelf. Inside lie ornaments made across multiple winters. You feel the air shift as she unwraps each one with care. A well-documented detail from this era is that most decorations were handmade or repurposed from everyday materials. Paper cloth scraps, dried fruit bits of ribbons saved from birthday gifts, even small tin shapes hammered out of leftover metal. These pieces carried memories instead of price tags. The teenage daughter sits by the table cutting long strips of coloured paper. The hues are soft and uneven but charming in their muted glow. She curls each strip, glues the ends, links them, and repeats until a chain begins to form. Her little brother holds up their growing garland like a triumph. Their laughter mixes with the scent of pine sap soaking slowly into the warm room. You kneel near the ornament box as the mother lifts a glass bauble with trembling fingers. It is thin, fragile, and slightly lopsided. Just as fragile is the story she whispers to no one in particular. It was blown by her own mother years ago before she left Europe and crossed the ocean. The ornament survived an entire voyage, 2 relocations, and countless curious toddlers. You can almost feel its history radiating from the glass, a small universe suspended by thread. Near the fireplace, a basket of walnuts sits open along with a tin of powdered sugar. A peculiarly charming custom, sometimes seen at the time, involved gilding nuts with bronze or silver paint to hang on the tree. This family does not gild theirs, but they do crack several open to snack on while working. The boy chews loudly until his sister scolds him for ruining the room's peaceful mood. The father steps back from the tree and nods with satisfaction. It stands slightly crooked, but somehow that crookedness feels intentional. Now comes the dangerous part. A box of tiny metal candle clips waits on the table. Each one is designed to hold a wax taper on a branch. Today you're watching a tradition that balances beauty with risk. The candles will not be lit until Christmas Eve, but the placement must be perfect now. You can almost feel the tension as the family clips them onto branches spaced just far enough apart to ease their nerves. Historical interpretation remains divided on whether people in this era truly felt safe using open flame, or whether they accepted the fear as part of the holiday charm. Judging by the father's restless glance, caution was certainly not absent. You help the daughter drape the paper chain across the branches. It droops unevenly, at first sagging more heavily on one side. She adjusts it with the tenderness of someone trying to please the room, rather than herself. When she finishes, she stands back and sighs, the kind of satisfied sigh that only comes after a small but meaningful accomplishment. On the mantel, a clock ticks steadily. A basket of knitting sits beneath it, half-finished mittens spilling outward. A small dish of cloves and orange peels sits by the window, releasing a warm, citrusy perfume that softens the cold air. This house carries 1,000 sensory layers that shape the season. The mother brings out popcorn next. Not microwaved, of course, but popped over the fire earlier in the day, each kernel irregular and slightly smoky. She threads a needle through the fluffiest ones, while the daughter strings the sturdy kernels. The boy pops more into his mouth and onto the string, but no one scolds him now. It is Christmas, decorating, not laundry day. A thread of quiet happiness winds between every gesture. You step toward the tree as the popcorn garland is added. It drapes lightly, catching the lamplight in small glowing beads. The room starts to feel complete, like a painting reaching its last strokes. Mixed in with the handmade ornaments are a few purchased items. Tin stars, a glass bird with a feather tail, and a tiny Santa figurine whose legs are jointed with wire. One offbeat detail from this period is that many families hung small toys directly onto the tree, believing the tree should look playful rather than elegant. The youngest child returns with a small basket of ginger cookies. They're shaped like bells and boots and little hearts. The smell of molasses fills the room. He offers one to you. You accept it even though it feels ghostly to take food from a memory. The cookie is slightly chewy with just enough spice to warm your tongue. As you eat, your eyes drift to the walls. Portraits of ancestors look down at the scene with solemn expressions, but the family barely acknowledges them. People of this era often lived among reminders of the past, yet tonight their faces glow with a focus on the present moment. Decorations continue to pile onto the branches. The tree leans further under the weight, but the family compensates with another careful twist of the stand. A small radio does not exist here yet. Instead, the mother hums softly a tune that sounds like an old carol that migrated across oceans before settling in American soil. The daughter joins in at a higher pitch. The boy tries, fails, and dissolves into giggles. The father finishes trimming a few stray branches to shape the tree more neatly. He wipes pine sap from his fingers onto a cloth and steps back to admire the final form. The room falls into a hush. Not the silence of exhaustion, but the silence of satisfaction, as if the tree has just taken a deep breath and settled into its new home. Decorative imperfections only make it more precious. Nothing here is store-polished or mass-produced. Everything carries fingerprints, intention, and memory. Outside, snow begins to fall again, leaving soft shadows on the window glass. The father closes the curtains, the mother lights a final lamp. The children stand shoulder to shoulder, hands clasped behind their backs, as if witnessing something sacred. You feel your body relax in the warm glow of the parlour. The branches sway slightly when the door in the hallway opens, releasing a breeze into the room. Even the sway feels alive, like the tree is settling in for the season. The fire pops in the hearth, sending a tiny spark upward that dies before reaching the mantel. You know the night is deepening. Soon the family will drift toward the kitchen for warm drinks and quiet conversation. You take one last look at the transformed room. Already it feels like a dream spreading across the edges of sleep, ready to fold into the next chapter of your wandering. You step back into the hallway, letting the parlour close behind you. Ahead lies the kitchen, glowing softer still, where heat and spices lift through the air like a lullaby. You drift from the parlour into the kitchen as if carried on a warm current. The moment you cross the threshold, the air changes completely. It is hotter, thicker, fragrant with layers of spice and steam that wrap around you like a soft quilt. Pots simmer, dough rests beneath cloth, and someone is stoking the stove with practiced rhythmic motions. The stove radiates a comforting heat that pushes back the winter chill clinging to your coat. Shadows wobble on the walls as flames shift behind iron doors. You stand still for a moment just to feel the room breathe. A mother and her eldest daughter work side by side at the main table. Their sleeves are rolled up, faces rosy from the warmth. The mother sprinkles flour across the tabletop in a gentle snowfall. The daughter kneads dough with both hands, pushing and folding, the same motion generations before her knew by heart. It is mesmerizing. A firmly established reality of the early 20th century was that the kitchen served as the home's engine. Everything essential happened here. Food, warmth, medicine, making conversation, and sometimes even quiet arguments that resolved long before quilts were turned down for sleep. You move closer and catch the aroma of cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and molasses. A pot on the stove bubbles with spiced apples that will eventually become a pie filling. Another pot steams, giving off a scent of onions and celery, slowly softening for the holiday feast. The kitchen smells like comfort and effort. You can almost taste the hours of preparation built into every dish. On a small shelf near the window sits a jar filled with something you do not immediately recognize. The daughter lifts it with a smile and explains that it is mincemeat preserved weeks earlier in anticipation of Christmas. An unusual little detail from the period is that some families included actual beef or venison in their mincemeat pies, mixing meat with fruit spices and sometimes a splash of brandy. The combination seems odd to modern tastes, but in 1900 it was treasured for its richness and longevity. You look at the jar again, imagining the unexpected blend of savoury and sweet. The mother moves toward the stove and checks a roasting pan. The scent that escapes is deep and savoury, filling your chest like warm smoke. She bastes the roast using a brush made of bundled twigs tied together with kitchen twine. Everything here is resourceful, efficient, familiar through generations. You lean closer, letting the heat fan against your face, easing the sting of the cold you carried inside. Across the table, two boys are peeling potatoes. They chatter between themselves, arguing about who can peel the thinnest ribbon. Their fingers move quickly, but not without slips. One boy flicks a bit of peel at the other, prompting a half-hearted warning from their mother. Despite the scolding, there is laughter beneath her tone. Christmas cooking does not silence children. It simply absorbs them into its rhythm. When you look toward the pantry, you see shelves lined with preserved goods, jars of peaches sealed in late summer, pickled vegetables, stored during harvest molasses, bottles half-filled sacks of flour, and tins stacked with meticulous patience. Contemporary accounts show that households relied heavily on preserved foods because fresh produce in winter was rare and often expensive. What you see here is a map of the family's year every season stored in glass and cloth. A grandmother sits on a rocking chair near the stove stringing dried cranberries with nimble fingers. The thread glides through each berry with a faint popping sound. She does not look up as she works, but her presence anchors the room. She hums a soft tune that blends into the crackle of the fire. The sound is so steady, so soothing that you find yourself rocking slightly in rhythm with her. The daughter pauses in her kneading and glances at the clock. Her mother notices and reassures her that the bread has plenty of time to rise before shaping. There is no rush in this kitchen. The holiday meal unfolds over hours, sometimes days, with tasks layered like the ingredients themselves. Still, an ongoing scholarly dispute suggests that not every household embraced such elaborate preparation. Some historians argue that Christmas feasts differ drastically based on region class and the availability of labour. Watching this family, you can easily imagine how varied the experience must have been across the country. The grandmother motions for you to taste a cranberry from her bowl. You pop one into your mouth and wince at the tartness. She chuckles softly, pleased with your reaction. A moment later, she hands you a small piece of candied ginger. The contrast is shocking but delightful. Sweet, warm, sharp. You savour it while the kitchen continues its gentle choreography around you. At the far end of the room, a small pot sits beside the stove with a cloth draped over it. When you lift the cloth, aromatic steam rises. It is mulled cider infused with cloves and orange peel. The warmth of it curls through your chest as you take a sip. The daughter sees your reaction and smiles knowingly. Everyone in this household has likely sipped from that pot dozens of times this winter. The boys finish peeling the potatoes and begin mashing them in a large bowl with butter and cream. They take turns pounding the wooden masher until the mixture becomes smooth. The younger boy sneaks another taste. The older boy threatens to tell, but only if he gets a spoonful too. For a moment you feel a wave of nostalgia for a life you never lived, a kitchen you never belonged to, and yet somehow inhabit now. The mother moves gracefully between tasks. She stirs a pot, checks dough, wipes. A spill opens the oven and gives instructions without breaking her calm composure. This is her realm. You watch her place cloves carefully into an orange, creating a fragrant pomander she plans to hang in the hallway. The pattern she arranges looks almost like a constellation. Beside the window, the daughter shapes cookies with tin cutters. Stars, hearts, trees, crescents. She brushes each one with a thin, sugary glaze before placing them neatly onto trays. You notice how her movements soften as she works, as if the cookies themselves inspire patience. The trays slide into the oven, releasing the smell of vanilla and sweet dough. It instantly transforms the room into something almost dreamlike. A pot boils over, suddenly sending a sharp hiss into the air. The mother reacts quickly, lifting it from the flame. Laughter breaks out across the room as the boys cheer for the excitement. The grandmother shakes her head, amused but unbothered. It feels like everything in this kitchen exists within a bubble of warmth and good humour. You wipe your hands on a towel resting on the table. The fabric is rough but comforting. The small details in this room ground you in a way few places do. The clink of utensils, the whisper of steam, the soft hum of a lullaby, the steady chop of a knife against wood. All of it settles your mind into a slower rhythm. The mother reaches into the pantry and retrieves a final bowl. She begins mixing spices, flour and butter for a pie crust. The daughter moves to help. Together they work in perfect unspoken synchrony. It is like watching a duet composed not of music, but of memory and routine. Soon the pies will be in the oven. Soon the roast will rest beneath a cloth. Soon the kitchen will cool and the family will drift into other rooms. But for now you linger in the glow of this hearth, absorbing the warmth that settles deep in your skin and bones. The cooking will continue tomorrow, shaping the meal that brings everyone together. And you will follow that thread through the next doorway as your journey continues to unfurl through this winter-worn town. You slip quietly out of the kitchen and back into the cold night, letting the warmth fade slowly from your hands as you walk. The air outside hits you with a sudden sharpness, but after the heat of the stove it feels almost cleansing. Snow drifts down in soft spirals. Lamps glow along the street, each one haloed by tiny crystals that cling to the glass. Ahead, a house window reveals something different from the handmade charm you just witnessed. A child is flipping through a thick, glossy catalogue beneath the soft flicker of lamplight. And just like that, you find yourself stepping into a world built not from pine branches and flower paste, but from ink and dreams. The family inside greets you warmly. Their living room is tidy bright and filled with the faint scent of soap and wool. On the table lies the famous Sears catalogue, its cover slightly curled from repeated use. You sit beside the child as he turns the pages with the urgency of someone exploring an entire universe. A key point historians often highlight is that these mail-order catalogues revolutionized access to goods across the country, especially for rural families who rarely saw big city shops. They could order almost anything from these pages: clothes, dolls, cookware, furniture, instruments, even the framed pictures hanging on this family's wall. The boy taps a page showing a small toy steam engine and beams with unspoken hope. His mother smiles, aware that hope does not guarantee purchase. Every item in this catalogue comes with a price, and rural incomes are modest. Yet this thick book inspires daydreaming. You feel it even now. Each page is a window into possibility, and in an era where travel is slow, this book shrinks the nation into something reachable. Beside the catalogue lies a well-sharpened pencil. The mother picks it up and circles a few modest items. She does not mark toys first. Instead, she circles wool stockings, a kettle, and a set of flannel petticoats. Practicality always comes first. You notice the fine script she uses to jot prices in the margin. She adds them slowly, carefully, her lips moving faintly as she calculates. You sense she has done this ritual many times. Her husband, leaning back in a wooden chair, watches her with the calm patience of someone who trusts her judgment completely. The father lifts a second catalogue, Montgomery Ward. Slightly slimmer, a little older. He flips through pages filled with tools, household gadgets, and farming equipment. One item catches his eye: a hand grinder with multiple attachments. He shows it to you and chuckles that it would save time but probably cost too much. His tone carries both humour and truth. Many families browse these catalogues more often than they purchased from them, but browsing itself was an event. On a nearby shelf, you notice a cardboard box tied with twine. The mother opens it and reveals a collection of old order forms. Some are years old, browned at the edges. One form lists a set of china plates, another a pair of boots, another a winter coat sent by rail to a relative in another state. A lesser-known detail from the period is that some households kept these old forms as personal ledgers tracking what they had bought and when. These scraps of paper became tiny time capsules of family history. You glance at a page showing Christmas decorations faintly printed in pastel hues. Delicate glass baubles, tinsel ropes made of thin, silvered strands, and even small manufactured angels. But while catalogue ornaments existed, they remained luxuries. Most families still made their own. The little girl of the house points at an angel and says she wants one someday. Her father ruffles her hair and murmurs that maybe next year will be kinder. Across the room, the grandmother sits in a rocking chair polishing her wire-rimmed spectacles. She watches the catalogue browsing with gentle amusement. She tells you that when she was a child, nothing like this existed. If she wanted something, she had to hope a travelling peddler passed through, or her family made it themselves. She admits she still finds catalogues magical, though secretly overwhelming. She prefers simple goods with clear purposes, but she loves watching the children dream. The boy flips the pages faster now, landing on bicycles. Bright, shiny, impractical for winter. His eyes widen. The daughter beside him leans closer to admire the baby dolls dressed in lace-trimmed outfits. She touches the paper lightly as if she might feel the fabric through it. Her mother laughs softly and tells her not to press too hard or she will smudge the ink. A small debate begins at the table. Should they place an order this year or save their money for spring needs? Some experts note that catalogues were both liberating and stressful. They opened the world but also introduced desires that strained modest budgets. You watch the parents exchange a thoughtful glance. They're weighing priority against longing in real time. The mother eventually folds the catalogue closed. The boy gives a small sigh, the kind that tries to hide disappointment but does not quite succeed. She reaches for him, gently smoothing his hair, and reminds him that Christmas is not about how many things arrive in the mail. She nods toward the kitchen doorway where the scents of cooking still linger in the hall. He brightens at once. Food, warmth, laughter. That is enough. Yet the dreaming does not end. The father picks up the catalogue again once the children wander off to play. He turns to a page showing a set of cast-iron cookware. He taps one of the illustrations with a quiet smile, and you realise he has his own private wishes that he may never voice aloud. The grandmother asks to see the book. The father hands it over with a flourish. She adjusts her spectacles and studies the pages with the intense curiosity of someone examining an artifact from another world. She lingers over the musical instruments section. A harmonica, a fiddle, a pump organ that no one in this house could ever afford. Still her eyes shine thoughtfully as if she's hearing notes no one else can hear. The mother folds the marked order sheet and sets it aside for later. She will think about it again tomorrow and the next day, balancing needs and hopes as the holiday approaches. That is the rhythm of this century. Too much to dream of, not enough to buy, yet endless determination to craft joy from what is possible. Snow begins to thicken outside. The father rises to stir the fire in the stove. Sparks jump, glow and fade. The catalogue rests on the table like a quiet promise. Perhaps they will send the order. Perhaps not. Either way, the dreaming has warmed the room as surely as the hearth. You step outside again, letting the night swallow you gently. Behind you the family gathers near the fire, their voices soft and content. Ahead the holiday continues to unfold, leading you toward the next heart of the season, the restless excitement of children waiting for Christmas Eve. You follow a narrow lane lined with thin icicles that cling to gutters like crystal claws. The night grows quieter, but inside the homes you pass the atmosphere softens into something restless and bright. You pause outside one house, where a warm, lively glow spills from the windows. Inside, children buzz with a kind of excitement that sends sleep running for cover. You step in gently, letting the door click shut behind you. The room hums with anticipation so rich you can practically taste it. The parlour looks different than when you last saw such a room. Decorations are already hung, the tree stands proudly in the corner, and the air smells faintly of pine-cooling gingerbread and wool mittens drying by the stove. 3 children scurry around you in a blur of chatter and mismatched socks. You ease into a chair near the fire, settling into their world as if you've been a part of it for years. A girl with loose curls sits cross-legged on the rug, clutching a small book of stories. She reads aloud, stumbling over a word now and then, her determination shining through each correction. Her little brother builds a tower of wooden blocks beside her. His tower leans dangerously, but he taps the next block into place with careful, breathless precision. Their oldest sibling hovers near the window, fogging the glass with each exhale, as she scans the sky for any sign of sleigh bells. Her imagination is doing laps now. One well-established feature of childhood in this era was that Christmas Eve carried far more anticipation than the morning itself. With gifts modest and time scarce, the thrill came from waiting, not unwrapping. Parents knew this and often leaned into the excitement. You see this now as the mother enters the room carrying a basket lined with cloth. She tells the children she has a surprise for them. They fall silent immediately. Even the block tower builder freezes mid-reach. She lifts the cloth to reveal 3 bright oranges. Their colour glows like captured sunshine in the dim lamplight. The children gasp softly and glance at each other wide-eyed. You may smile at their reaction, but you remind yourself that winter fruit was precious, sometimes seen only once a year. The mother hands each child an orange, slowly, ceremonially, a moment savoured like a rare treasure. Their fingers close around the cool dimpled skin with a reverence you rarely see today. A curious footnote from the era is that some families saved the peels to dry near the stove, using them later to scent drawers or boil into fragrant teas. Nothing was wasted, not even the perfume of an orange. You notice the mother slip the peels into a small tin on the mantel already half filled. The father sits in a rocking chair, reading from a newspaper he folds and refolds in slow, thoughtful motions. He glances at his children with a quiet smile, knowing full well that bedtime will be a theatrical adventure tonight. He clears his throat gently and begins telling them a story about his own childhood Christmas one, involving a runaway goose, a broken sleigh, and a snowstorm he claims was taller than he was. Interpretations vary widely regarding how much adults of the time embellish their stories, but judging by the exaggerated gestures he uses now, you suspect he is adding a generous helping of drama. The children sit rapt, leaning so far forward you fear they may topple into the hearth. When he finishes, they erupt into laughter. Even the grandmother in the corner, knitting steadily with thick wooden needles, shakes her head with an amused sigh. She murmurs that the goose had never run away and the sleigh was not broken. The father protests with mock outrage, insisting she remembers it wrong. The debate dissolves into warm laughter that fills the room like a second fire. Eventually the children return to their festive chaos. The youngest tries to balance his orange on top of his block tower, declaring it the star. It wobbles, slips, and rolls across the rug. He chases it with a squeal while the others cheer him on. The mother pretends not to see, though you catch the upward curve of her smile. Near the window, the oldest child has moved from watching the sky to tying ribbons around tiny parcels. Inside each parcel is something small, a pine cone, a folded drawing, a scrap of lace. Homemade gifts stitched together by imagination rather than money. She explains shyly that she likes to give her family small surprises they can keep in their pockets. You feel your heart soften at the sweetness of her quiet craft. The clock on the mantel ticks steadily, its rhythm matching the rocking of the grandmother's chair. The fire snaps softly, sending tiny sparks up the chimney. Shadows dance on the wallpaper, stretching long and thin, as if mimicking the restless energy in the room. The children pace, rearrange their toys, inspect the tree again, and pepper their parents with questions. Will Santa bring a doll for the sister? Will he bring a whistle for the brother? How does he not burn himself coming down a chimney? Where does he keep all those oranges? The father answers each question with theatrical seriousness, causing his wife to hide a chuckle behind her hand. He insists Santa is exceptionally careful, and perhaps a little magical. The children hang on these explanations as though they are receiving secret instructions for becoming adults. A knock sounds at the door. All three children freeze like startled kittens. Their eyes grow impossibly wide. The mother answers the door and returns with a neighbour carrying a bundled loaf of dark sweet bread. The visitor explains that she baked too much and wanted to share. You recognise this as a quiet form of seasonal generosity that threaded communities together long before modern donations and drives. The grandmother invites her in, and the women chat briefly while the children sniff the air with curiosity. The neighbour eventually departs, leaving the warm loaf on the table. The mother slices it thinly and passes each child a piece. The flavour is rich, dense, with molasses and spice. The children chew slowly, letting the sweetness stretch as long as possible. You savour your own slice, feeling the warmth spread from your tongue to your fingertips. Bedtime becomes inevitable. The mother announces it gently, but the children erupt with groans. The father stands stretching dramatically, pretending to fall over from exhaustion. The youngest imitates him, collapsing into a heap of giggles. The older children protest that they are not tired. They look tired, deeply, hilariously, entirely. After multiple rounds of promising to sleep quickly, they gather their oranges, small gifts, and well-loved toys before heading upstairs. Their footsteps thump unevenly up the wooden stairs. Soft giggles drift from the hallway. The grandmother shakes her head again, though her eyes shine with affection. You sense the house settling as the children finally quiet down. The mother exhales a long, relieved breath. The father lowers himself back into his chair, rubbing his temples with playful weariness. For a moment, the entire room goes still. Then they share a look that carries the weight and joy of parenthood across centuries. You allow the warmth of this home to soak gently into you. Tomorrow morning will bring surprises, even if they are humble ones. But for now, the true magic lies in the anticipation itself, glowing like an ember beneath the blankets of every child in town. Outside, the snow continues falling softly, ready to usher you toward another corner of this 1900s Christmas world. The tolling bells and quiet devotion of midnight and dawn gatherings. You step back into the quiet night, letting the cool air settle around your shoulders like a thin shawl. The world feels softer now, gentler, as if the excitement of the children you just left has drifted upward and thinned into the sky. Snowflakes drift lazily past lamp glow. Your footsteps sink into a whitened street that leads you toward a distant sound. A bell, slow, deep measured. It vibrates through the air with a kind of ancient patience. You follow it. Ahead, townsfolk move in clusters, their lanterns flickering beneath woolen hats and heavy coats. Some walk quickly with a seriousness that suggests devotion. Others wander at a slower pace, guided more by tradition than urgency. You fall in step behind them as they head toward a small church built of stone, its roof edged with snow, its door glowing like a hearth welcoming travellers. Inside the sanctuary hums with soft murmurs and the gentle scrape of boots against wooden floors. The air is warmer than you expect, scented faintly with beeswax from the candles flickering in brass holders. People gather in pews, shaking off snow, whispering greetings, and settling into a calm that feels as ancient as winter itself. The steady bell outside fades until its echo becomes a memory pressed lightly into your ribs. You take a seat near the middle, blending into the sleepy congregation. The minister, wrapped in heavy robes, stands near the pulpit, sorting through thin sheets of paper. Surviving records from this period make it clear that Christmas services varied wildly across communities. Some churches offered solemn rituals meant to quiet the spirit. Others leaned into music and celebration. Tonight, this small gathering aims for something gentle, something that helps ease the town into the heart of winter rather than stir it awake. A woman in the front row begins tuning a violin, plucking with tiny, deliberate motions. The faint notes slip into the air like the first threads of a dream. Behind her, a small group of amateur singers clear their throats quietly. Their voices will not be perfect. That is part of the charm. In 1900, church choirs often consisted of whoever could carry a tune and spare the time. No polished performances, just neighbours offering their voices to the season. When the service begins, it does so softly. The minister speaks in a tone that reminds you of falling snow. His words drift into the room with quiet intention. He talks about light in darkness, about hope that flickers but persists, about families who found their way through hardship. You watch the congregation lean subtly toward his voice, as if absorbing warmth from it. Children sit beside their parents, some fighting sleep, others wide-eyed with curiosity. A few clutch small knitted scarves or handkerchiefs. One girl curls into her mother's side, her breath slowing with each minute. A thoughtful detail from this era is that many families treated Christmas services as moments of community, rather than pure religious obligation. For some, it was the only time of year they saw distant neighbours, or heard music outside their own homes. You notice that even those who seem less devout still listen with quiet respect. As the choir stands, a hush sweeps across the room. Their first notes rise imperfect, but earnest. Hints of harmony tremble in the air, settling eventually into a melody, warm enough to loosen your shoulders. The hymn speaks of stars and shepherds and long winter nights. You feel the vibration of the low voices in the wood of the pew as if the building itself hums along. The violin joins gently, weaving a silver thread through the music. The sound lifts the hymn into something tender and delicate. Children sit up straighter. Adults breathe more deeply. It is astonishing how a single instrument can soften a room. Yet not everyone in the congregation listens with equal reverence. In a corner near the back, two boys nudge each other with secret mischief. The grandmother beside them sends a sharp look that freezes them instantly. Their hands fall stiffly to their laps. You catch the slightest lift of her lips afterward. The minister reads passages between songs. You recognize some of them from modern traditions. Others feel unfamiliar, shaped by the culture and priorities of a century ago. Some researchers continue to discuss how these services reflected broader social concerns of the era, from immigration anxieties to economic uncertainty. Listening now, you hear hints of those undercurrents woven subtly through the sermon, though gently softened by the season. After the readings, another hymn rises. This one is slower, carrying a wistful ache that settles deep in your chest. Voices waver here and there, but no one seems embarrassed. This music belongs to everyone in the room, not just to the talented. You find yourself swaying slightly, lulled by the rhythm. At one point, the minister invites the youngest children to come forward. They shuffle awkwardly toward the front, some clinging to parents, others proud to stand alone under the warm lamp glow. He presents each one with a small paper bag containing a few nuts, a peppermint, and a tiny booklet of simple verses. The children receive them with wide-eyed wonder. Small gifts, barely more than trinkets, yet treasured. Scarcity sharpens gratitude in ways that surprise you. A little boy stares into his bag as though it contains a miracle. He tips it lightly, peering in again, just to be sure the contents have not vanished. His sister nudges him proudly. Their mother wipes away a tear she may not want anyone to notice. As the service nears its end, the congregation stands one last time. The final hymn begins with a hesitant start, then gradually grows stronger as voices find each other. The violin swells beneath the singing, weaving the final notes into something luminous. Candle flames shimmer against the stone walls, casting moving shadows that make the sanctuary feel alive. When the minister speaks the closing blessing, the room exhales collectively. Coats rustle, boots shuffle, whispers rise. The candles near the altar flicker as if they too are preparing to go out. You take one last look before stepping outside. Snow falls thicker now, muffling the departing footsteps of the congregation. Outside, the cold air greets you with a sharp kiss, but the warmth of the service lingers in your bones. Families cluster together as they walk home, their lanterns glowing like floating stars along the path. Children clutch their paper bags and whisper excitedly. Adults lean close, sharing quiet reflections. You follow the winding road away from the church, listening as the last faint bell rings once more. Its tone fades into the snowfall, carrying you toward the next quiet tradition of the season, the simple, heartfelt art of gift-giving that asks for more sentiment than splendor. You walk down a dim side street, the service still echoing softly in your mind. Each window you pass reveals a different stage of Christmas Eve preparations, but one theme repeats again and again: the quiet ritual of wrapping gifts. Not mountains of them, not glittering piles, just a few small parcels that hold more meaning than material wealth. You feel yourself drawn toward one particular home where lamplight flickers through lace curtains, steady and inviting. You slip inside, letting warmth gather on your chilled skin. The family here sits around a sturdy wooden table, its surface covered with paper scraps, twine and little boxes. The room smells faintly of pine ink, and the citrus peels drying near the stove. A mother, father and 2 children lean close together as they work, speaking in quiet tones meant for the intimacy of this night. According to letters from the period, most households kept Christmas gifting modest, focusing on practicality and sentiment rather than extravagance. Watching this family now, you see that truth settle into every gesture. The mother folds brown paper around a small parcel. Her hands move with unhurried care. She ties it with red yarn saved from last year. Inside, you catch a glimpse before she tucks the edges a pair of knitted mittens made by her own mother. They are simple, sturdy and warm. The daughter receiving them tomorrow will burst with pride, not disappointment. Handmade gifts here carry a weight of affection that barely fits inside the wrapping. Beside her, the father wraps a thin rectangular object. The paper rustles softly under his fingers. When he finishes, he turns the package over and writes a name in looping script. You tilt your head to see it. It is a penny novel for his youngest son, a simple adventure tale with more heart than literary depth. A mildly eccentric custom from some households involved slipping small notes or riddles inside these books, clues for the children to follow the next morning. You see him tuck a folded scrap of paper inside with a grin that hints at mischief. The daughter works on her own set of gifts. She has drawn small portraits of her family members using pencil and charcoal. The likenesses are charming but imperfect, with noses a bit too round and eyes slightly too large. Still, her parents look at them with the kind of fondness that cannot be faked. She wraps them carefully, folding the paper as if it were delicate silk rather than everyday stock. She seals each one with a dab of flour paste that dries in a thin, pale crust. The youngest child wraps something bulky and odd-shaped. You lean in to see what it is and smile when you realize it is a pine cone decorated with tiny beads. He struggles with the paper, tearing one corner, then tries again, determined. His father gently helps him crease the fold, but allows the boy to tie the twine himself. The knot is messy, oversized, and perfect. On the table sits a small pile of previously received gifts waiting to be redistributed. Some families practiced what would later be called regifting, though without any stigma. Objects were not collected for novelty. If something could serve a better purpose in another pair of hands, it was passed on. The mother picks up a tin cup polished until it shines. She turns it thoughtfully before adding a ribbon and placing it beside the other packages. The wrapping materials themselves tell a story. There is no glossy printed paper, no sticky tape, no ribbons that curl with a quick flick of scissors. Everything here is reused or handmade. The family keeps a tin of fabric scrap string and leftover paper bits from trading goods. They use each piece sparingly, trimming edges with care. Researchers widely agree that conservation shaped many domestic traditions in this era, especially in winter, when money was stretched thin. The father pauses, lifting a small wooden box that has clearly seen many Christmases. The corners are worn, the surface smoothed by time. Inside, protected by cloth, lies a brooch shaped like a flower. He hands it to the mother with a quiet smile. She hesitates, touched, and you can see in her face that this piece belonged to someone she loved long ago. He tells her it should be worn again, not tucked away. There is a soft shimmer in her eyes as she presses the box to her chest. At the far end of the table, a peculiar little tool sits beside a pile of dried lavender. The grandmother who has just entered the room uses it to tie sachets meant for drawers and trunks. A curious detail from the era, is that fragrant sachets were sometimes given as gifts to keep linen smelling fresh through long winters. She hands one to each child, who inhale the scent with sleepy satisfaction. The conversation drifts toward memories of past holidays. Some researchers question whether families at the time truly felt nostalgic in the modern sense, or whether memory served mainly practical lessons. Listening now, you sense that nostalgia absolutely lived here, though perhaps expressed in quieter tones. The father recalls a Christmas when he received only a single carved whistle, yet felt like the wealthiest boy in the county. The mother remembers making her first rag doll from scraps of her grandmother's dress. Each story carries a tenderness that wraps around the room like another layer of warmth. As the packages accumulate, the children begin arranging them under the tree. The daughter places hers, neatly aligning them with pride. The youngest child plops his pine cone gift in the very front, as if announcing it to the world. The tree branches shiver slightly as cold air drifts in from the hall, making the candles flicker unlit but waiting. When the family finishes wrapping, they sit quietly for a moment, taking in the simple beauty of their handiwork. No ornate bows, no overflowing piles. Just a few thoughtful gifts arranged with care. The quiet feels sacred, as if each gift holds a wish sealed inside its modest wrapping. The grandmother settles into her chair with a sigh. The father stirs the embers in the stove. The children yawn and curl into blankets draped across the parlour chairs. The room dims as the mother lowers the lamp flame. The tree stands faintly illuminated, its handmade ornaments catching what little light remains. The scene calms you deeply. In the stillness, wrapped in fire glow and snow, muffled quiet gifting feels less like an exchange and more like a language spoken through hands rather than voices. Outside, snow settles in thick pillows on the window ledges. The world slows further, guiding you toward a new rhythm. And as you slip out the door, your path bends toward the bustling corners of the town where last-minute vendors work through the night, keeping the holiday heartbeat alive. You head toward the livelier part of town now, following the scent of roasted nuts curling through the crisp night air. Snow gathers in soft mounds along the street edges, and the glow of lanterns brightens as you approach a crowded row of vendors braving the late hour. Their stands create a patchwork of warmth in the winter darkness, each one pulsing with its own little world of voices, smells, and hurried transactions. You slow your steps, letting the energy rise around you like a gentle tide. The first stand you approach belongs to a man bundled in layers of wool so thick he resembles a walking quilt. His cart is filled with paper cones of chestnuts, each cone steaming faintly in the freezing air. The scent reaches you instantly. It is deep and earthy, a fragrance that promises warmth the moment it touches your tongue. If we trust the surviving accounts of early 20th century cities, bustling street vendors like this were essential to the holiday geography. They brought goods directly to the sidewalks, turning frigid evenings into miniature markets that thrived despite the cold. The vendor hands you a cone without a word, his eyes kind beneath his hat. You peel a chestnut, carefully warming your fingertips on the shell. The nut inside is soft, smoky sweet. You savour it slowly as you wander deeper into the market lane. Children dart between the stands, their laughter bright against the hush of falling snow. A few clutch small coins, probably saved for weeks. Others drag parents by the hand, pointing excitedly at trinkets they cannot afford but long to admire. Vendors respond with indulgent smiles or mock sternness, depending on how often the children loiter near their stalls. You pause at a booth selling ribbons and fabric scraps. The vendor, a woman with nimble fingers and a shawl draped gracefully around her shoulders, ties a ribbon around a customer's parcel in one swift motion. You watch her hands work with effortless precision. A delightfully unexpected habit from the era was that some families collected leftover vendor ribbons, specifically to reuse as tree decorations or to tie bundles of keepsakes. Resourcefulness was a constant companion to celebration. A little farther down, a man displays an assortment of tin whistles, pocket mirrors, marbles, and hand-carved toys. His breath forms puffs of mist as he calls out prices in a rhythmic chant. A girl tries a whistle, producing a shrill note that cuts through the night like a startled bird. Her mother laughs nervously and hurriedly ushers her away. The vendor grins and shrugs, unbothered by the brief chaos. Near the end of the row, a cart emits warm, sugary aromas. You step closer and see a pan filled with freshly made brittle studded with peanuts. The vendor shatters a large slab into pieces with a wooden mallet each strike, sending delicious cracks through the quiet air. He offers you a shard. It sticks to your teeth instantly, sweetness spreading across your tongue, while tiny bits crunch under your bite. The sound feels almost cheerful in its crispness. Two boys linger near a barrel of red striped sticks. They whisper to each other about whether these peppermint sticks are enchanted, convinced they glow faintly under lamplight. Their debate grows louder until their father intervenes with a playful shove that sends one boy slipping slightly on the icy ground. They recover quickly and march off pockets, jingling with their new treasures. Vendors exchange warm greetings with each other as customers rotate through. These people work long hours often in brutal cold, yet they greet each sale with gratitude rather than fatigue. Contemporary observers noted again and again that holiday street commerce created a unique camaraderie among strangers, a brief weaving together of individual lives into shared seasonal ritual. As you continue wandering, you pass a young man selling newspapers with sensational headlines printed in bold ink. He reads them aloud to attract buyers, his voice rising with theatrical flair. You overhear one bizarre tidbit about a horse in Chicago that allegedly learned to ring doorbells. You raise an eyebrow and the vendor shrugs with a grin that suggests even he doubts the story. Still, the tale has already sold him at least 3 papers. At another stand, a woman sells small pouches of dried spices. She explains to a customer that mixing them with warm cider creates a festive drink. Her voice has a soft cadence shaped by an accent from far across the ocean. Many immigrant vendors carry echoes of their homelands in their products and their stories. Her spices include cloves, cardamom, cinnamon bark, and something she calls starflower seed. The customer nods politely, likely unsure what that is, but enchanted by her confidence. Nearby, a heated debate has sparked between 2 older men over the quality of a particular vendor's roasted almonds. They speak with passion, pointing in opposite directions as they defend their favourite stands. Within historical scholarship, views remain split over how much street food reflected cultural blending versus regional tastes. And hearing these men argue with such conviction makes you wonder how scholars could ever settle the issue. Snow thickens around the lanterns, now blurring their light into soft halos. People pull their scarves up higher, tuck their chins deeper, and press on with their last-minute shopping. A few vendors begin packing their goods into crates, but most stay open knowing that holiday urgency keeps customers coming until the final hour. A musician appears near the end of the market, his violin case open at his feet. He plays a quick, lively tune that sends pockets of mirth rippling through the crowd. Some children dance their boots slipping on the slush. Adults sway, subtly smiles, curling softly at the corners of their mouths. The notes rise and fall like sparks from a fire. As the night stretches on the market, gradually quiets. People return home carrying bundles tied with string pockets full of treats and hands warmed by the memory of brief exchanges with friendly vendors. You continue walking, chestnut warmth fading from your palms, watching the stalls dim one by one. The final vendor waves goodnight to you as he blows out his lantern. The street settles into silence, leaving only the whisper of snow and distant voices drifting from warm windows. You continue onward, ready to follow the trail of steel rails and steam that will carry you into the next chapter of this wandering Christmas, the clatter motion and reunion of holiday travel on the railroad. You leave the fading glow of the market behind and step into a quieter stretch of road. Ahead, a plume of steam curls above the rooftops like a ghostly ribbon. The sound reaches you next, a long, low whistle drifting through the cold night air, followed by the steady metallic heartbeat of wheels turning over frozen rails. You feel it before you see it. Christmas travel in 1900 is not subtle. It vibrates through the ground and through the chest in equal measure. You follow the sound to the station where lanterns swing in the hands of porters and travellers huddle together on the wooden platform. Snow gathers on coats, hats, moustaches and eyelashes, transforming the waiting crowd into a gallery of frosted statues. Yet beneath the shiver and the fatigue you sense expectation tugging everyone forward. Trains during this season carry more than passengers. They carry hopes, reunions, regrets, and beginnings. Archival evidence from the decade indicates that holiday rail travel surged dramatically, becoming one of the defining features of winter in America's growing cities. The locomotive emerges from the dark like a great iron animal, hissing, breathing, spraying sparks as brakes engage. Heat shimmers around it in ghostly waves. People shift toward the doors, clutching small cases or bundles wrapped in cloth. A mother lifts her child closer, whispering comfort through chattering teeth. A group of young men laugh loudly, perhaps louder than necessary, but their spirits warm the cold around them. You climb aboard and settle into a wooden seat worn smooth by years of travel. The car fills with soft chatter and the muffled thump of boots against the floorboards. The air tastes faintly of coal smoke, wool and oranges tucked into coat pockets. Lamps sway gently above their light, golden and sleepy. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. 2 seats ahead, a soldier on leave leans forward, telling a story to the woman seated across from him. His voice carries pride mixed with the weariness of long duty. She listens intently, nodding at intervals, her hands wrapped around a small parcel in her lap. Perhaps a gift for someone waiting down the line. Diaries and ledgers from the time strongly suggest that soldiers, labourers and migrant workers relied heavily on trains to reconnect with family during the holidays. The railroads knitted the expanding nation together in ways few other technologies could match. Beside you, a boy presses his face to the cold window pane. He watches the station recede, lanterns shrinking until they become tiny stars swallowed by the snow. He breathes onto the glass and draws shapes with a gloved finger. His father smiles softly at the gesture, then unwraps a piece of peppermint and hands it to him. The boy takes it as though receiving royal treasure. A few rows back, 2 elderly women share a basket of food wrapped in cloth. They offer slices of fruitcake to anyone nearby, insisting it is a family recipe. You accept a piece. It is dense, sweet, and full of spices that warm your mouth instantly. Something small and strangely charming from that period is that travellers often exchange food on long rides, turning trains into temporary dining rooms. Passing a slice or a tin was not merely kindness, but a kind of social ritual, a way of softening the journey's rough edges. The conductor makes his way down the aisle, punching tickets with a quick click that punctuates the gentle hum of the car. Snow smudges his coat shoulders, melting slowly into dark spots. He nods politely at passengers, checking that children sit safely and that luggage stays tucked beneath seats. Through the window, the dark countryside unfurls in fleeting glimpses. Snow-covered fields, barns huddled against the wind, occasional farmhouses glowing like low stars in the blackness. The train rocks steadily, a motion so rhythmic it feels like drifting on a winter tide. People settle deeper into their coats, drifting into drowsy half-sleep. Ahead of you, 2 men engage in a quiet debate about whether rail travel has made Christmas more stressful or more joyful. One argues that people now feel pressured to travel long distances. The other insists the rails bring families together in ways impossible before. Researchers are still not unanimous about the broader emotional impact of early rail travel, though most agree it reshaped the season profoundly. The train slows briefly at a small rural station. A lone lantern swings outside, casting an amber pulse over a cluster of bundled passengers waiting to board. They climb on quickly, stomping snow from their boots. One woman carries a chicken in a wicker cage, clucking softly beneath a blanket. You smile. It seems even poultry gets to visit relatives for the holiday. As the train moves again, conversations ebb and flow. A pair of university students discuss their professors with theatrical exasperation. A seamstress stitches a tear in her glove with tiny rapid motions. A man in the corner sketches fellow passengers in a notebook, capturing the solemn curve of a tired mother's shoulders and the bright eyes of a child fighting sleep. The rocking of the carriage calms everything. Even the occasional jolt only adds to the lullaby rhythm. Lamp sway boots slide slightly on the floor, and the hum of wheels becomes a kind of whisper. Some passengers doze, heads tilted against windows, mouths softening in sleep. Others watch the drifting snow, lost in thoughts, too deep and quiet to speak aloud. You notice a small girl sitting with her grandmother. The child holds a doll stitched from scraps, its yarn hair tied with a tiny bow. She whispers a story to it, voice hushed, as if afraid to disturb the gentle spell of the train. Her grandmother presses a kiss to the top of her head and wraps an arm around her shoulders. As the miles pass, the train car becomes a small world of its own, a vessel filled with anticipation. Every passenger carries a destination in their chest, a reunion, a promise, a memory, a hope. The whistle sounds again long and low, announcing the approach of a larger station ahead. Lights appear in the distance, brightening the windows with faint gold. Passengers gather their bundles, stretch stiff limbs, and prepare to step once again into the winter night. You rise slowly, feeling the movement of the train settle into your bones. The next stop invites you forward, where new faces and new traditions wait beneath the glow of many windows. You step off the train and feel fresh snow settle on your coat. The wind carries voices from many languages, many histories, many December rituals. You follow them deeper into town, ready to witness how immigrant traditions weave themselves into the fabric of American Christmas. You step away from the station into a district where the streets feel warmer, despite the cold, warmed not by weather, but by the many languages drifting from open doorways. Lamps glow behind curtains stitched in patterns from faraway places. The scent of bread, spices, coffee, and a dozen unfamiliar herbs curls through the air. You have wandered into a neighborhood shaped by newcomers' families who arrived from distant shores, bringing memories of December that did not always resemble American Christmas at all. Here the holiday feels like a tapestry woven from threads carried across oceans. As you walk, you pass a narrow bakery owned by a German family. The windows fog with heat and you feel drawn inside. You open the door to find shelves lined with stolen, dusted-in sugar loaves, shaped like wreaths and trays of cinnamon-rich pastries cooling on wooden racks. The baker lifts one loaf proudly, explaining that it contains almonds, raisins, and candied peel, a recipe unchanged for generations. Contemporary observers of the time often noted that German households played an influential role in shaping American Christmas traditions, particularly with decorated trees and festive sweets. You sense the truth of that as you inhale the comforting aroma of warm spice and fruit. The baker's wife offers you a small slice of a honey cookie shaped like a star. It melts on your tongue, sweet and fragrant. A little girl tugs at her mother's apron, pointing at you with curiosity. Her mother encourages her to practice her English greeting, and the child whispers a shy hello, cheeks flushing with pride. This small moment feels like a bridge between worlds. You step back outside, still warmed by the bakery's glow, and wander toward a lively Italian household bustling with preparations. Their windows are decorated not with evergreen boughs, but with bright ribbons and strings of dried citrus slices. Inside, several relatives sit around a long table, rolling out dough for biscotti and shaping small fried pastries dusted with sugar. A pot simmers on the stove, releasing a strong, savoury aroma. One of the women explains that the dish is part of their traditional feast held on Christmas Eve, a meal shaped by family rather than by strict religious rules. Diaries from immigrants at the time strongly suggest that food often served as the anchor of cultural identity, preserving memory even when language and landscape felt foreign. As you watch them work, an older man plays a gentle melody on a mandolin. The tune drifts through the room with a tender, nostalgic quality. A child dances in soft, bouncing steps, arms swinging loosely as if her body simply cannot resist the melody. Her grandparents clap along, smiling with eyes that shine like embers of old stories. Farther down the street, you hear the rhythmic chanting of Hebrew prayers coming from a small apartment. Inside, a Jewish family gathers around a table lit by candles. They are not celebrating Christmas, but engaging in their own winter observance, and you sense the tranquility of their ritual. The father reads quietly, his voice calm and steady. The mother passes plates of food to their children while reminding them to speak softly out of respect for the prayer. Interpretations among historians diverge sharply regarding how Jewish communities navigated the growing public emphasis on Christmas in this era. Some embraced elements of the season socially, while others held firmly to distinct practices. Listening now, you feel that the truth rests somewhere in a fluid middle ground shaped by each household's choices. You thank the family silently for allowing you to witness a moment of their winter life and continue walking. The snow deepens beneath your boots, crunching softly with each step. On the corner, you encounter a cluster of Irish immigrants gathered outside a boarding house. They are stringing garlands of holly while laughing at a joke that ripples through the group in waves. One man hands you a sprig of holly and insists it will bring good luck through the year. A fellow worker teases him, saying the tradition only works if the holly is placed above the door before midnight. The first man argues back that luck does not bother with clocks. Their laughter rolls into the snow-lit street warm enough to melt a path around them. Inside the boarding house, a pot of stew simmers over a coal stove. A woman stirs it slowly, telling a story about her first winter in America, and how the cold seemed even more shocking than the long journey across the ocean. She explains how families tried to recreate familiar songs and stories to make the holiday feel less strange. Something almost forgotten by modern accounts is that many immigrant communities held informal storytelling nights near Christmas, using tales to stitch the old world into the new. You watch her eyes gleam as she speaks, the steam from the pot curling around her like a soft veil. Across the street, a small group from Scandinavia is decorating a tree with paper hearts folded intricately in red and white. The hearts are woven together like baskets, and the children fill them with nuts and candies. One girl proudly holds up her creation for you to admire. It is slightly lopsided, but her parents cheer as if she has mastered an art form. A young man explains that in his village they would place candles around the tree and dance in a circle while singing traditional songs. He demonstrates a few steps, stamping his boots lightly on the floorboards. The rhythm is lively yet peaceful, like a memory given shape through movement. Everywhere you turn, voices of different languages float into the snowy air: German, Italian, Yiddish, Irish accents, Scandinavian syllables that rise and fall like waves. The diversity here does not clash. It harmonizes. People greet each other gladly, exchange small treats, offer help with chores, and share stories of winters spent on distant continents. On one porch you see a Polish woman hanging a small star-shaped ornament she crafted from straw. She explains that in her family straw decorations honour humble beginnings and remind them of simple virtues. Something about her quiet smile makes the ornament glow more brightly than any candle. You stand for a moment in the centre of the street, letting this beautifully mixed world swirl around you. The snow falls softly, settling on your coat and eyelashes. The night feels alive with layers of tradition, each family carrying its own flame, each flame contributing to the warmth of the neighbourhood. A group of children from different households gather in the street, showing each other their holiday treats. One child offers another a cookie shaped like a crescent moon. Another shares a handful of roasted nuts. Their accents mingle freely, forming a language of laughter. You realise these children will grow up weaving pieces of each other's traditions into their own, shaping the America that will follow. Families begin retreating indoors as the cold deepens. Windows glow brighter. Music hums behind doors. The neighbourhood shifts into a softer rhythm, preparing for sleep or celebration or both. You walk onward, letting these many cultures fade into the distance like embers floating upward. Ahead lies another layer of Christmas, the one shaped by work hardship, and the hard-won scraps of joy found by those whose holiday shifts never truly end. You step away from the warm swirl of immigrant traditions and turn down a quieter street, where the glow of holiday windows fades into something dimmer, steadier. Here the homes are smaller, the porches lean with age, and a weary stillness hangs in the air. The wind moves more freely through this part of town, stirring loose snow into drifting spirals. You follow the footprints of late workers, the ones whose shifts stretch long past sunset. Their paths lead you toward the heart of a truth often overlooked: not everyone in 1900 gets to rest during the holidays. Many must simply fold Christmas into the narrow spaces left between exhausting hours. As you walk, you pass a narrow building humming with muffled motion. You push the door open just enough to step inside. The air hits you with a familiar industrial mixture of dust oil and warm fabric. This small garment factory runs late tonight. Rows of women sit at foot-powered sewing machines, their backs curved, their fingers quick despite the fatigue etched into their shoulders. Holiday garlands hang along the walls, but they look like afterthoughts, placed to soften the reality of labour. A foreman walks the aisles, tapping a clipboard against his palm. He seems more impatient than unkind, but the tension in the room is unmistakable. A few seamstresses glance up as you enter. Their faces show surprise, then polite indifference, then a return to the blur of motion. Holiday or not, each stitch tonight edges them closer to earning a little extra for their families. Records preserved from the period make it evident that industrial workers, especially women, were more likely to work right up to Christmas Eve and return shortly after their time dictated by factory schedules rather than seasonal sentiment. A young woman pauses to massage her wrist, wincing slightly. She keeps a photograph tucked beside her machine, a small portrait of two children wearing mismatched coats. She glances at it now, drawing a quiet breath before returning to her work. You realise she will not see them until after midnight, yet she hums softly under her breath, a lullaby shaped by habit more than by joy. You wander toward the back of the factory, where a few women gather around a small stove during their brief break. The stove radiates just enough warmth to soften the numbness in their fingers. One woman holds a tin mug of weak coffee, swirling it slowly. She explains with a tired smile that the factory pays extra for holiday overtime, and even a few cents make a difference. Another woman nods. She has a son who wants a toy train, and tonight's earnings might just allow it. Their words are steady without bitterness. Survival effort and hope mix together here in ways that feel rawer than the festive lights outside. Near the door, a basket sits filled with fabric scraps. A subtle but charming oddity that appeared in some households was the tradition of workers taking home colourful scraps like these to craft small gifts for their children. The women reach into the basket as they leave tucking bits of cloth into their pockets. You imagine those scraps turning into dolls, soft animals, or tiny pillows stitched late into the night. Stepping outside again, you walk toward the business district where shops remain open. In a general store, a clerk arranges shelves with a tired yet determined expression. His vest is neatly buttoned, but his eyes tell you he has been working since before dawn. Holiday shoppers stream in with last-minute needs: buttons, candles, ribbons, spices, and forgotten essentials. The clerk manages each request with brisk politeness. He counts coins, wraps parcels, and thanks customers with a practiced nod. Holiday descriptions in newspapers of the time reveal that shop workers often bore the brunt of the season's demands, labouring long hours while watching others prepare for celebration. During a lull, he rubs his temples and leans briefly against the counter. He laughs quietly when you ask if he's ready for Christmas. He confesses that he will likely fall asleep before dinner tomorrow, yet he looks toward the window where a small bundle of greenery hangs above the door. He says his younger sister decorated it for him, insisting they must have at least one festive touch here. Behind the counter, a tiny tin whistle lies half hidden. He explains that it is his gift to his nephew purchased weeks ago and kept safe until he can finally go home. His voice brightens just a little when he talks about the child. You sense how much these small promises sustain him through the weary hours. Further down the street, you notice the soft glow of a house where a domestic worker is returning from her shift. She walks slowly, her boots heavy with snow. She carries a basket of laundry she finished earlier. The wind tugs at her shawl, but she keeps moving with the kind of steady resilience that feels carved into her bones. Personal letters from household servants of the time testify to the reality that many of them worked through the holidays tending other families' celebrations before tending their own. She enters her small room behind the main house. Inside, a single oil lamp burns. She unwraps her scarf and sets her basket down. After stretching her aching back, she reaches under her bed and pulls out a tiny box she has saved for months. Inside is a simple hair ribbon she will give to her daughter tomorrow morning. You feel the weight of quiet love in the gesture. She sits on her bed, staring into the lamplight, letting the silence collect around her like a warm blanket. You realise she does not resent the work. She simply longs for a moment to breathe. And tonight, she finally has one. When you return outside, the street feels emptier. Snow falls in thicker, slower flakes. Lamps flicker in the wind. You hear faint laughter from homes filled with abundance and equally faint sighs from those with little. Both truths coexist without contradiction. As you walk, you consider the larger meaning of what you have witnessed. Historians examining this period regularly reach contrasting conclusions about whether Christmas strengthened community ties or amplified social divides. The evidence before you suggests both dynamics at once. Joy mingles with fatigue, generosity with scarcity, hope with burden. The holiday is not a perfect picture. It is a mosaic of uneven pieces, each one shaped by circumstance as much as by tradition. You continue down the road, the snow softening your footsteps. The night remains cold, but something warm settles inside your chest. You have seen the effort behind the holiday glow, the quiet heroism, woven into long hours, the tenderness hidden beneath exhaustion. Ahead, lights appear from a different kind of gathering place, one built not for work but for compassion. Your path carries you towards settlement houses and charitable spaces, where holiday generosity blossoms into something powerful, shaping the season in yet another way. You follow the sloping street toward a part of town where the buildings are taller but more worn, their bricks darkened by years of soot and winter storms. Here the windows glow, not with the soft light of private parlours, but with the steadier brightness of communal spaces. As you approach, you hear footsteps echoing inside, accompanied by laughter, clattering dishes and the faint rhythm of a piano played by someone who knows only half the notes, but plays them as though the room depends on it. You have reached one of the settlement houses' places built to cradle those who have little, especially during the coldest season. You step inside and feel warmth wrap around you immediately. The air smells of bread broth and freshly cut pine branches hanging along the stair rail. Volunteers move through the halls with sleeves rolled up and aprons dusted in flour. Families sit at long tables covered in mismatched cloths. Children dart between adults carrying wooden toys or scraps of ribbon. Holiday generosity fills this house like a second kind of heat. A woman with silver streaks in her hair greets you warmly. She introduces herself as the director of the settlement house. According to community notes published at the turn of the century, such houses served as lifelines for newly arrived immigrants and low-wage workers, offering classes meals, clothing, and companionship without judgment. You see this spirit woven into every corner of the room. She leads you into a dining hall where a feast is taking shape. Volunteers ladle steaming soup into bowls while others arrange baskets of bread along the tables. Children tug at their mothers' skirts hoping to eat early. Some laugh, some fidget, some stare wide-eyed at the growing display of food. The atmosphere vibrates with both gratitude and restrained chaos. You pause beside a table where two women meticulously decorate a small tree using paper chains made during a craft session. The chains loop in bright, uneven arcs that look wonderfully human. A faintly amusing footnote in the culture of the time is that some settlement houses repurposed donated scraps of wrapping paper from wealthier families to create decorations for their own celebrations. You notice a few multicolored links that clearly once wrapped luxury goods now reborn as cheerful ornaments. In a nearby room, a group of children are listening to a volunteer read a story. She holds the book high so all can see the illustrations. The children lean forward eagerly, mouths slightly open, eyes shining. Some have never seen a picture book before. You watch a boy in the front row trace the air as though following lines of the drawings with invisible fingers. The volunteer turns each page, slowly savouring their anticipation. Across the hall, another volunteer sorts through baskets of donated clothing. He arranges boots, scarves, coats, and mittens by size. Each garment carries a history, some mended, many times others hardly worn. He checks every seam before offering items to arriving families. You overhear him tell a mother that she may exchange her son's coat after the holiday, if it does not fit properly. His kindness softens the ache in your chest. The director guides you upstairs to a room buzzing with sewing machines. Women gather here to learn new skills that might yield better wages. They practice stitching hems, reinforcing seams, and shaping collars. The hum of the machines blends with quiet conversation. One woman explains that she hopes to become a seamstress so she can leave factory work behind. Her words tremble with equal parts fear and hope. Diaries from charitable organizations of this era often mention such aspirations, recording the profound impact that winter programs had on families navigating unfamiliar worlds. Back downstairs, music begins drifting through the halls. You follow the sound to a common room where a volunteer plays an upright piano. The keys stick occasionally creating uneven melodies, but the children do not mind. They dance in clumsy circles, spinning until they fall giggling to the floor. Their mothers smile softly, grateful for a moment of lightness. Soon the director announces that it is time for the holiday meal. People gather eagerly, chairs scrape, voices rise, bowls of warm soup are served alongside hearty loaves of bread. The steam fogs the windows, turning the outside world into a snowy haze. As everyone begins to eat, a calm settles over the room. Hunger gives way to comfort. Fear gives way to familiarity. This is a place where winter feels less cruel. Nearby, a group of volunteers prepare small parcels for families to take home. Inside each parcel is a bar of soap, a tiny tin of tea, a few dried fruits, and a knitted item made by local women's clubs. It is not much, but the care with which each bundle is tied communicates something deeper than quantity. You overhear the director mention that new donations arrived earlier: blankets, wool socks, and children's books. She expresses relief. Community support ebbs and flows, and an unexpected gift of supplies can transform the entire season. A woman standing beside her wipes her eyes, discreetly overwhelmed by the generosity she received. In one corner, a young volunteer attempts to mend a child's wooden toy that has split along a seam. He works carefully, not wanting to disappoint the boy who watches him with absolute faith. After a few fumbling attempts, he manages to secure it with a bit of glue and twine. The boy beams as if handed a treasure. As you linger, you overhear two older volunteers discussing their work. One believes settlement houses are reshaping American urban life by fostering unity. The other argues that they risk softening the urgency of larger structural reforms. Those who study this era continue to voice competing understandings of how these institutions influence society. Listening to the two women now, you sense their debate mirrors conversations still unfolding more than a century later. When the meal ends, families begin to drift homeward through the snow, carrying parcels and wearing coats they did not own that morning. Children wave from doorways. Volunteers call warm goodbyes into the cold. The director stands near the entrance, thanking each person who leaves her voice soft but steady. You step outside as the final lanterns flicker. Snow falls in gentle sheets. Behind you, the settlement house glows like a refuge carved into the winter night. Ahead, the path leads to a different sort of figure, one who appears in many shapes across this era, and whose story is far from settled, the evolving face of Santa Claus waiting at the next turn. You make your way down a quieter lane now, the sounds of laughter and clattering dishes fading behind you. Fresh snow gathers in soft layers along the rooftops, and the night seems to hush itself, in anticipation of something whimsical and strange. The wind carries a faint scent of pine and chimney smoke, and ahead you notice shop windows displaying curious illustrations. Fat merry men in red, thin austere men in bishop's robes, woodland spirits draped in fur, mischievous figures with sacks whose contents are not entirely reassuring. You have stepped into the complicated world of Santa as he existed in 1900s America, a character still shifting into the familiar figure you know today. You pause before a print shop where a cluster of colourful lithographs hangs in the window. One image shows a jolly rotund fellow with rosy cheeks and twinkling eyes. Another portrays a tall, slender figure dressed in bishop's garments. A third features a more rustic character, wearing furs and carrying switches alongside gifts. Holiday illustrations of the period reveal a landscape of Santas as varied as the cultures that contributed to him. Every family seemed to hold a slightly different version in mind. You step inside the shop greeted by the scent of ink and drying paper. A printer wipes his hands on a rag and welcomes you. He proudly displays stacks of holiday postcards, featuring yet more interpretations of the gift bringer. Some Santas look grandfatherly, others look like forest guardians. One even appears more like a mischievous sprite. The printer explains that customers request different designs depending on their heritage. For German families, the figure often resembles St. Nicholas, or the stern Christkindl companion. For Dutch families, Sinterklaas still holds sway. For others, a jollier man in fur-trimmed attire has begun to take root. You notice a small boy studying the cards intensely. He moves from one image to another, brow furrowed as if trying to determine which is the real Santa. When he asks the printer directly, the man laughs gently and taps his nose. The right one, he says, is whichever one finds you on Christmas Eve. The boy accepts this answer with solemn sincerity, though he glances back at the cards as if hoping one will glow with confirmation. The printer unwraps a fresh sheet to show you a more recent illustration. A plump, cheerful man with a hearty smile and a red suit trimmed in white. He looks closer to the modern Santa, though not quite solidified. Writers of the era frequently remarked that newspapers and magazines were gradually shaping a unified image for the American Santa, especially through widely distributed illustrations. Still, the process was far from complete, and local traditions resisted being absorbed into a single portrait. A volunteer letter writer sits at a small desk in the shop helping children craft notes to Santa. Some kids ask for toys, others for new shoes, and one child simply asks that her father returns safely from a distant job. You watch her fold her letter carefully and tuck it into an envelope decorated with swirling ink flourishes. The printer promises to deliver it straight to the North Pole, and she nods with quiet trust. As you continue through the district, you find a small community hall preparing for a holiday celebration. Inside, families gather near a handmade backdrop painted with stars and snow. A wooden chair sits in front draped with a modest red cloth. A man approaches wearing a fur-trimmed coat and a cottony white beard clearly sewn by a well-intentioned seamstress. Children cluster around him with squeals of excitement. His boots creak loudly as he sits settling into the role with a mixture of pride and nervousness. An almost forgotten seasonal quirk from this era was the tendency for Santa actors to improvise personality traits wildly. Some Santas were gentle, others were stern, some told long stories, others simply grunted and distributed oranges. You watch this particular Santa adjust his beard and then greet a trembling little boy with surprising grace. The boy whispers his wish so quietly that Santa leans down almost double to hear him. "A warm coat," the child mutters. Santa nods deeply, promising nothing specific but offering reassurance all the same. Nearby, two older women discuss their memories of Christmas figures from their childhoods. One recalls a benevolent saint who rewarded good behaviour. The other remembers a mischievous figure who frightened children into obedience. Their conversation highlights how many influences shaped the American Santa Dutch legends, German folklore, British holiday customs, and emerging commercial imagery. Researchers reviewing the evidence often dispute how quickly these traditions blended into what people now consider a single figure. Standing here, surrounded by shifting faces and competing customs, you understand why the debate is still lively. You continue down the hall where a small stage is set for a children's play. Painted cardboard mountains lean precariously backstage. A child dressed as a reindeer adjusts her antlers with trembling hands. Another child, playing a helper elf, practices his lines nervously. Their teacher encourages them with a bright smile, reminding them that the purpose is joy, not perfection. You take a seat among the parents as the room fills slowly with anticipation. The lights dim slightly. The play begins. The children march awkwardly across the stage, reciting their lines with enthusiasm and occasional bewilderment. At one point, the elf forgets his cue entirely and stands frozen. The audience waits in gentle suspense until the smallest reindeer nudges him and whispers his line loudly enough for everyone to hear. Laughter ripples across the hall. Even Santa, waiting off stage, chuckles into his cotton beard. The performance ends in a cheerful, wobbly chorus. Parents clap loudly, some wiping tears from their eyes, not from emotional depth, but from the pure charm of childhood effort. Santa steps forward to congratulate the cast, presenting each child with a small wooden token carved earlier by volunteers. The children clutch their tokens with pride, some already planning to show them off at school. You sense how powerful this figure is becoming regardless of his shifting form. Santa is not yet fixed in the culture, but he is slowly gaining shape through plays, postcards, shop windows, and shared stories. His purpose remains the same: to embody generosity, magic, and a touch of mystery at a time of year when people crave all three. As the gathering winds down, Santa removes his beard and helps sweep confetti from the floor. Children wave goodnight through the doorway. Families pull their coats tight as they step into the cold. The hall empties, leaving only the faint scent of pine resin and candle wax lingering in the air. You step outside and breathe in the night. Snow drifts silently around you, softening the edges of the world. Ahead, a softer glow rises from narrow streets lined with wooden porches and lanterns. You're heading into small-town country, now ready to see how Christmas flows differently, where the pace of life moves on gentler feet. You leave the lively hum of the town behind and follow a winding road leading into quieter country. The snow seems deeper out here, softer underfoot, and the night sky stretches wider, sprinkled with a faint shimmer of stars. As you walk, the houses grow fewer and farther apart, each one standing like a warm island in an ocean of winter stillness. In this rural stretch, Christmas unfolds at a slower pace, shaped less by shops and crowds, and more by weather distance and the rhythm of daily labour. A small farmhouse comes into view first, its windows glowing with the gentle flicker of lamplight. Smoke rises from the chimney in a steady plume curling into the cold sky. You step onto the porch, hearing the wooden boards creak beneath your boots. Inside, a family is gathered around a long table, their voices low, their movements unhurried. They glance up to greet you before returning to their quiet tasks. Here, celebration is woven subtly into the fabric of everyday life. The father sits by the stove mending a harness strap that split earlier in the afternoon. His hands move skillfully, threading thick cord through leather. Writers chronicling daily life around 1900 frequently observed that rural families could not afford to set aside chores entirely for the holidays. Animals still needed feeding, fires needed tending, and tools required repair. Christmas existed not as a break from these tasks, but as something folded gently among them. The mother stirs a pot simmering on the stove. The aroma of root vegetables and herbs rises into the room, earthy and comforting. She hums softly, perhaps without realizing it, her voice blending with the crackle of burning wood. On a nearby table, loaves of coarse bread, cool beneath cloth towels, and a crock of butter waits patiently for morning. Children sit on the floor near the tree, which leans slightly as though still adjusting to indoor life. The branches are decorated sparsely, a few paper ornaments, several strings of popped corn, and 2 small tin stars. A surprisingly playful practice appeared in certain households where children tucked handwritten wishes into the branches, not expecting magic, but enjoying the ritual. Tonight, the children carefully secure their little notes into the tree, smoothing the paper with shy reverence. Near the window, a grandfather carves a small object from a block of wood. His pocket knife glints in the lamplight. The shavings curl into delicate spirals, falling like tiny pale petals onto his lap. He works slowly without rush, shaping what appears to be a toy horse. His eyes glow with the quiet pleasure of craftsmanship. He glances up once to give you a nod before resuming his patient carving. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, rattling the shutters. You pull your coat closer and wander through the room, absorbing the peaceful atmosphere. Rural homes often carried an intimate stillness during the holidays, shaped by distance and scarcity. There is no jostling of crowds here, no rush for last-minute purchases, no glow of extravagant displays. Celebration takes place in gestures: a pot of soup, a mended harness, a carved toy, a fire stoked generously enough to keep the cold at bay. In one corner, a teenage girl sits at a small writing desk. The lamp beside her casts a warm halo across her page. She's composing a letter to a friend in a neighbouring county, describing the snowfall, the tree, and the faint excitement she feels for the morning. Surviving community ledgers indicate quite plainly that letter writing was an essential thread of rural social life, a way to shrink the distance that separated families and friends. She seals the envelope with wax and places it carefully beside her books, planning to ask her father to post it once the road's clear. Just then, a loud thud echoes outside. The family pauses, listening. The father sets aside his harness and opens the door. A neighbour enters stomping snow from his boots, carrying a bundle under his arm. He greets everyone with a booming laugh that fills the room with warmth. The bundle contains cured sausage and a jar of pickled beets, small offerings for the holiday. The mother thanks him sincerely and he waves off her gratitude, insisting the season calls for sharing. The children eagerly examine the jar, marvelling at the jewel-toned beets glowing in their brine. Neighbours often travelled long distances to visit during the holidays, braving dark roads and frigid winds. In this era, hospitality was as essential as fuel for the fire. A guest rarely arrived empty-handed, and hosts rarely allowed them to leave without food or stories. Tonight is no exception. The family ushers the neighbour to a chair, and conversation flows easily between them. One child asks whether sleighs ever fly in deep winter. This sparks a round of imaginative storytelling. The grandfather claims that on especially windy nights, some sleighs lift an inch from the ground. The father chuckles, the mother shakes her head, and the neighbour swears he once saw a team of horses slide across an icy hill as if carried by spirits. The children sit wide-eyed, letting their imaginations stretch into the snowy darkness beyond the window. As laughter settles, the room quiets again into a gentle hush. The mother checks the soup. The father resumes his mending. The grandfather blows wood shavings from his carving. The neighbour leans back, sighing deeply with contentment. You look around and sense how different this rural celebration feels compared to the bustling city you visited earlier. Here time moves differently. The night does not rush. The tasks do not demand frenzy. Joy is found not in abundance, but in closeness, in familiar faces reflected in the lamplight. Still within this peaceful rhythm, complexities linger. Academic interpretations tend to splinter when assessing the emotional landscape of rural holidays. Some argue these gatherings embodied simplicity and contentment. Others suggest they masked isolation and hardship. As you watch the family interact, you feel both interpretations could be true, each shaping the holiday in its own way. The neighbour eventually stands, brushing off his coat and tightening his scarf. The family escorts him to the door, exchanging warm wishes. He steps into the dark, his lantern swinging like a small golden moon. The distant crunch of his footsteps fades into the night. Inside, the children yawn one after another, leaning against each other like drowsy little sparrows. The mother guides them toward their beds. The father dims the lamp. The room cools, softened by darkness. You step outside into the calm night, the farmhouse glowing faintly behind you. The snow sparkles under moonlight, untouched and serene. Ahead you see another cluster of lights, this time accompanied by faint singing carried on the wind. You follow it, drawn toward the music rising from homes and churches where carols flavour the winter air. You follow the faint ribbon of song drifting through the night, its notes rising and falling like warm breath against the cold. The path curves gently toward a cluster of small houses gathered along a narrow street. Their windows glow softly, and from one of them spills the muffled harmony of voices singing together with imperfect but enthusiastic devotion. As you draw closer, the music clarifies into a familiar carol, though shaped by the cadence and accents of a century past. The melody pulls you forward as steadily as a guiding hand. Inside the first home you pass, a family sits near the fireplace singing beside a single oil lamp. The father keeps time by tapping his foot gently on the wooden floorboards, while the mother's voice carries the tune with strong, comforting steadiness. Their children add their own contributions, sometimes on key, sometimes not, but always with earnest effort. Evidence gathered from period correspondence makes clear that households often relied on singing, not instruments to mark the holiday. Instruments were precious, expensive, or shared between neighbours, so the voice itself became the heart of musical celebration. You step inside, quietly welcomed instantly by smiles. The air feels warm with fire heat and the faint sweetness of cider simmering nearby. A teenage boy tunes a battered fiddle, plucking at the strings, wincing, adjusting and trying again. When he finally coaxes a clear note from it, the family cheers. He tucks the fiddle beneath his chin and joins the next verse, adding a trembling but heartfelt harmony. The sound fills the small room, brushing against the wooden beams overhead. In the corner, a young girl practices a different carol using sheet music that looks too crisp and new for everyday use. She hums, first reading the notes carefully, then tries singing them aloud. Her voice wavers with nervousness, but her mother encourages her with a nod. Holiday sheet music had become increasingly common by 1900, and publishers often released special editions in December. Looking at the girl's determined expression, you see how exciting it must have been for families to own even a single printed page of music. Across the room, the grandfather sits in a rocking chair with a harmonica resting in his hands. When the fiddle grows quiet for a moment, he lifts the harmonica to his lips and plays a few playful notes, causing the younger children to giggle and clap. Something mildly peculiar tucked into the season's customs involved people passing instruments from hand to hand, regardless of skill, simply to bring variety to the evening songs. Tonight, the grandfather joins the music with cheerful confidence, even if his harmonica occasionally slips into uncharted melodies. After a few carols, the family decides to take their voices outdoors. They bundle into scarves, mittens, and thick coats, lighting a lantern to carry with them. You follow as they step into the crisp night air. Snow crunches beneath every footstep. Their breath frosts the darkness in small bursts as they walk from house to house, offering their songs freely to whoever opens the door. Caroling in this quiet town feels like a wandering gift. Some families invite the singers inside for a moment of warmth. Others listen from porches, nodding along with the tune. Children hurry to windows to watch wide-eyed, pressing their hands against cold glass. You notice a toddler clapping wildly at the end of each song, regardless of whether the rhythm matches. Outside a small church, a larger group has gathered. They cluster beneath a lantern hung from a wooden post, its glow widening the space into a soft golden circle. A man with a low, gentle voice leads them into a hymn. The sound carries with an evenness that travels farther than you expect. Snowflakes drift lazily into the lantern light, hovering before settling onto hats and shoulders. A woman steps forward with a small pitch pipe to help the group find the right key. Musicians of the time often used such tools to guide singers, especially when instruments were scarce. She blows softly, and the group adjusts their voices, blending more smoothly. You stand among them, letting their harmony settle around you like a blanket. Midway through the carol, a child yawns so dramatically that half the group laugh softly. The leader ruffles the boy's hair before continuing the song. The moment feels beautifully human, a reminder that perfection has never been the purpose of caroling. It is connection, warmth, and the shared breath of community. As the hymn ends, the minister steps outside, holding a pot of hot cider. He offers mugs to everyone, steam rising like small ghosts from each cup. He mentions that earlier in the day, several parishioners practiced different arrangements of Silent Night, hoping to perform it smoothly for the morning service. Research communities examining this era often diverge sharply over which carols were most popular at the turn of the century, since regional tastes varied widely. Listening tonight, you realize the debate likely stems from the sheer abundance of songs carried by immigrant communities, each adding its own rich thread to the winter tapestry. You sip the cider, savouring its warmth. The group begins another carol, this one livelier, with clapping woven between verses. The fiddle joins in, though its young player misses a few notes and grimaces in embarrassment. The grandfather pats him on the shoulder, whispering encouragement until the boy smiles again. Farther down the road, more homes glow with lamplight and faint music. You join a wandering line of singers as they move slowly along the lane. At each stop, families open their doors with gentle smiles. Some offer ginger cookies, others offer nothing but gratitude and the warmth of listening. Children peer from behind skirts, their eyes bright with wonder. At one house, a woman places a small candle in each window, explaining that her mother taught her this tradition to honour absent loved ones. The gesture adds a luminous stillness to the night. Lanterns flicker, snow settles. Voices merge into a soft chorus that drifts upward like breath offered to the stars. Eventually the carolers begin to part ways, each family heading home through the deepening quiet. You walk with them for a time, listening to their footsteps crunching in gentle rhythm. The lanterns grow dimmer as people retreat inside. Soon the road returns to silence. You pause and look back at the small town glowing faintly under the winter sky. The music lingers in your ears even after the last note has faded, as if the night itself hums softly to keep the memory alive. Ahead, a brighter cluster of lights beckons. You sense a larger space, a different kind of holiday spectacle emerging. You begin walking toward it, ready to step into the early grandeur of department store wonderlands, waiting just beyond the next snowy bend. You follow the faint glow ahead until it swells into something brighter, fuller, almost theatrical against the winter night. The street widens, the sidewalks flatten, and suddenly, the quiet countryside mood dissolves into a rush of distant voices. Lanterns swing above doorways, steam rises from vents in small ghostly plumes, and right in the centre of it all stands a towering building with broad glass windows lit from within like the inside of a snow globe. You have reached the heart of a city's pride, the department store, one of the grand experiments of turn-of-the-century commerce. You approach slowly, letting the spectacle pull you closer. Behind the glass mannequins pose stiffly in coats trimmed with faux fur. Toy trains circle tiny villages, artificial snow blankets, miniature hills. A small clockwork Santa figure waves its arm in a jerky pattern that somehow feels both charming and eerie. Children press their noses to the cold glass tracing frost patterns as they gaze at everything with wide-eyed awe. Holiday reports published in the decade reveal unmistakably that department stores transformed December into something dazzling, introducing visual pageantry that felt almost magical after the long dim days of winter. As you step through the front doors, warm air washes over you. The scent of cinnamon perfume wool fabric and polished wood blends into a heady welcome. The floor beneath your boots shines with careful waxing. Clerks in crisp uniforms move with a sense of purpose, speaking softly yet confidently to customers. Overhead, a chandelier hangs like a frozen constellation, catching the lamplight in hundreds of tiny reflections. You take your first steps into the central hall, and it feels like entering a festive theatre. Garlands drape down from balconies. Paper bells sway gently whenever someone passes too quickly. Soft music floats from a small ensemble playing near the staircase. Their notes wrap around the room like ribbons. People move in slow looping currents, pausing to marvel at displays arranged with impeccable precision. Near the toy department, a crowd gathers around a demonstration. A clerk winds up a mechanical bird that flutters its tin wings and emits a cheerful little chirp. Children gasp and clap. A mother looks torn between delight and dread, already calculating whether this toy fits the family budget. A clerk in white gloves swoops in to answer questions, his tone polite and measured, as though trained to soothe anxieties before they bloom. You wander deeper into the displays. A small but delightfully offbeat behaviour people adopted then was saving the store's printed holiday advertisements to repurpose as decorations or even scrapbooks of seasonal inspiration. You see children clutching these handbills, now captivated by the bright images of toys they may never own but enjoy dreaming about. A girl near you flips through one, pressing her lips together in deep concentration, as if studying a map to treasure. On the second floor, a long counter stretches across a section dedicated to specialty confections. Glass jars hold peppermint sticks, fruit drops, chocolate lumps, and candied citrus peel. Clerks scoop these treats into paper sacks, twisting the tops with quick, practiced motions. One child knocks lightly on a jar to see if the candy really sparkles under the lamplight. The clerk pretends to scold, then winks. Further along, a seamstress in the dressmaking department adjusts a velvet shawl on a mannequin. She pins it just so, stepping back with a critical eye. Her assistant dusts stray threads from the display while whispering suggestions. Sewing machines hum behind a curtain, producing small gift items before the holiday rush ends. The atmosphere mixes artistry with urgency. You approach a large, velvet-draped alcove where a modest but spirited Santa figure sits in a painted wooden chair. This version of Santa is plump, with cheeks reddened more by the store's heat than by magical flights. A long line of children winds toward him. Some are eager, others nervous. A few cry as soon as they are lifted onto his lap, overwhelmed by the strange beard and booming voice, but most beam whispering wishes into his ear. One little boy asks not for toys, but for his father to return from a distant mining job. Santa pauses, touched, and holds the boy's hand for a moment. Then he promises the child that his father will surely hear how much he's missed. As you drift onward, you pass a group of young women examining holiday gloves. They debate colours, softness, stitching, and price. One pair has tiny embroidered flowers near the cuffs, and a woman presses it to her cheek, imagining for a moment how it might feel to receive something so lovely. Her friend nudges her, gently urging her to try them on. She does, smiling at her own reflection in a nearby mirror. Another display showcases home goods, polished kettles, enamel mixing bowls, jars of preserves packaged for gifting. Men consider these items with thoughtful expressions, as though calculating which might please their wives without suggesting unmet chores. A clerk guides them gently, offering hints based on budget and preference. In the men's department, racks of suits and trousers line the walls. A father examines a wool coat, running his hand down the fabric with hesitant reverence. A clerk assures him it will last years if well cared for. The father glances toward the children, tugging at his sleeves, weighing cost against need. He folds the coat carefully back onto the rack. Perhaps next year. A few steps away, a cosmetics counter draws a curious crowd. Small bottles of perfume glimmer beneath the lamplight. A click invites customers to sample, offering a delicate spritz onto their gloves or handkerchiefs. The scents are floral, citrusy, musky, each one promising a touch of elegance. You see a young woman inhale deeply, her eyes softening with longing. As you explore the store, you overhear clerks discussing sales numbers, restocking plans, and the possibility of expanding next year's holiday displays. Those studying the period reach markedly different conclusions about whether department store spectacle democratized luxury or fueled unrealistic desires. Some argue that these grand displays made beauty accessible to the working class, offering moments of delight even for those who purchased nothing. Others believe they ignited unrealistic expectations that deepened social divides. Standing inside this glittering hall, you sense both truths shimmering in the same breath. You return to the central staircase and look down at the bustling scene. Every floor glows with possibility, yet beneath the merriment lies a subtle undercurrent of strain. Customers tighten their hands around their coin purses. Clerks exchange weary glances. Managers whisper instructions. Holiday magic requires work, and everyone here plays a part. Still, as you stand watching, a small girl catches your eye. She holds a single candy cane with both hands as if it were a priceless treasure. Her mother kneels beside her to straighten her coat. The girl nods fiercely, declaring she will save the candy for Christmas morning. Her determination feels like the purest form of holiday spirit. As the store prepares to close for the night, clerks dim the chandeliers. Customers shuffle toward the doors, bundles tucked under arms. Santa removes his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. The music softens, trailing off into quiet. You step outside into the crisp winter air. The world feels darker now, lit only by the store's fading glow and the soft halo of street lamps. Snowflakes drift in gentle spirals. You draw your coat closer and begin walking again, carrying with you the shimmer of a holiday marketplace that dazzled a generation. Ahead, a quieter offering of the season awaits postcards, letters, and small paper greetings that travelled across the nation, weaving hearts together through ink and intention. You leave the glittering department store behind, stepping once more into the quiet winter night. The snowfall has slowed into delicate flakes that drift lazily through the air, settling on your eyelashes and coat. The street here is calmer, the lamps glowing faintly like fireflies caught in glass. As you walk a softer kind of holiday, magic begins to appear in the windows of small shops and private homes, postcards propped on mantels, folded notes tucked into evergreen branches, embossed cards displayed beside oil lamps. This is a quieter corner of Christmas, one shaped by ink paper and the subtle intimacy of handwritten greetings. You approach a tiny stationery shop, squeezed between a bakery and a tailor. Its window displays an array of postcards with vivid illustrations, snowy landscapes, laughing children, cozily bundled animals, and figures that look vaguely like Santa, but with features that shift from one card to another. Inside, the warm scent of ink and paper rises around you. The shopkeeper, a thin man with spectacles perched low on his nose, sorts stacks of cards with great precision. He greets you warmly and gestures toward a set of newly arrived designs. The cardstock feels thick beneath your fingers, the colours rich and slightly textured. Letters exchanged among friends and relatives repeatedly highlight that postcards had become a vital thread of holiday connection, especially as families spread across cities and rural regions. Many people relied on these small rectangles of paper as expressions of affection, nostalgia, or even gentle humour. You study a postcard decorated with a moonlit winter scene, the ink shimmering faintly as you tilt it. The shopkeeper explains that artists often created original illustrations that printers reproduced by hand-layering pigments. He points to another card showing a small child riding on a pig laughing wildly. The image seems absurd to modernize, a shy but charming odd custom cropped up whenever artists for holiday cards indulged in quirky symbolism that was never fully explained. People simply accepted the whimsy, exchanging cards that today might spark puzzled laughter. The door jingles as a young woman enters, brushing snow from her cloak. She sorts through a stack of cards with elegant floral borders, searching for one that feels right. When she finds an image of a candle glowing against evergreen boughs, her face softens. She tells the shopkeeper she wants to send it to her brother who works far from home. As she speaks, you sense her longing woven into the decision. She purchases a small bundle of cards and leaves quickly as though eager to begin writing. In the corner, a small desk sits ready for customers to test pens or draft short messages. You sit for a moment, noticing the faint scratches of previous writers on the desk's surface. Someone has practiced their signature several times. Another scribbled the beginnings of a poem. A small basket beside the ink bottle holds discarded attempts, each one a fragment of someone's thoughts. You step back outside, carrying the soft glow of the shop with you. Farther along the road, laughter drifts from a home where a family is gathered around their parlour table. They lift postcards into the lamplight, passing them back and forth, as though examining tiny treasures. The mother reads a message aloud from a cousin in another state. The father studies a comical card featuring a goat wearing a festive cap, grinning as he shows it to the children. Surviving memoirs offer consistent testimony that families often kept stacks of postcards from previous years tucked into drawers or tied with ribbon, revisiting them during quiet evenings, as if paging through memory albums. At the writing desk in the parlour, the eldest daughter composes a greeting with great concentration. She holds her pen, carefully dipping it occasionally into an inkwell. Her script is neat but slightly hesitant. She writes slowly, pausing between sentences as if considering how to convey warmth across distance. Her younger siblings attempt their own messages, though. Their handwriting wanders across the page like the trail of a curious mouse. A small boy shows you his card proudly. On its front, a plump robin sits on a snowy fence post. Inside, he has written only 2 words misspelled but earnest: "Be happy." His mother beams at him, smoothing his hair with gentle fingers. As you leave the house, you pass several more homes where postcards adorn mantels and cabinets. Some are displayed like artwork. Others hang from ribbons pinned to the wall. You notice one card with an elaborate embossed border, touched with glittering powder that catches the light. Another card shows 2 children riding in a sled pulled by a dog with an almost regal expression. A peculiar micro-tradition surfaced among a handful of families who clipped postcards to their Christmas trees, treating them as ornaments that preserved connections across many winters. Further down the road, you pass a post office still lit despite the late hour. Inside, a postal clerk sorts piles of envelopes into tall bins. His motions are steady but slow, shaped by long hours and the weight of the season's volume. He tells you that the week before Christmas is always the busiest, with letters arriving from every corner of the country. Some envelopes carry crisp handwriting. Others show smudged fingerprints as though written in haste or under dim light. He hands you a returned postcard whose ink has blurred from melted snow. Someone will be disappointed tomorrow discovering the message never arrived. He sets it gently aside as if promising to try again. Outside, the chill deepens and you wrap your coat more tightly. The glow of lanterns reflects on the snow, illuminating small footprints and wagon tracks. You follow the road as it bends toward a quieter neighbourhood, where fewer windows shine, but each one seems to hold a warm story waiting behind the glass. As you walk, you reflect on the power of these simple paper tokens. Those analysing period sources routinely arrive at differing conclusions about whether postcards strengthened emotional bonds or replaced deeper forms of communication. Some argue they trivialise sentiment, others claim they preserved it. Watching the families tonight, you feel the answer lies somewhere between postcards acted as threads small but strong enough to stitch distant hearts together. You continue your stroll, the night growing softer around you. A gentle murmur of conversation drifts from a house where candles glimmer faintly. Their warm light reminds you that the holiday is not only about words exchanged on paper, but also about illumination in the long dark of winter. Ahead, the snow brightens, reflecting the steady flicker of candle flames and electric bulbs beginning to dot the streets. Your path leads into the glow of homes experimenting with new ways to light their celebrations, inviting you to witness the next chapter of this evolving holiday landscape. You follow the soft brightness ahead until it grows into pockets of warm gold scattered along the snowy street. Windows shine with a deeper glow tonight, as though each household is engaged in its own quiet experiment with fire and light. Some homes flicker gently, others sparkle in tiny points. A few glow with a steady modern brilliance. You have stepped into a moment of transformation unfolding across America at the turn of the century, when families began choosing how to illuminate both their trees and their long winter nights. The first house you approach radiates a warm, buttery shimmer from its parlour window. When you step inside, you find a family gathered around their Christmas tree, which trembles gently as someone adjusts one of the branches. Dozens of small wax candles sit carefully clipped to the boughs. Their flames sway as the door closes behind you, washing the room in a beautiful trembling glow. Writers of practical household guides from the era repeatedly emphasized that candlelit trees were to be admired cautiously, never left unattended, and always paired with a bucket of sand or water nearby. The father of this household keeps exactly that set discreetly behind a chair. The children sit cross-legged on the rug, mesmerized by the shimmering lights. The mother hovers nearby, watchful, ready to steady any candle that burns too low. The flames reflect on the glass ornaments, creating a dance of colors that ripple across the walls. You feel the warmth on your cheeks and the hush of reverence that settles whenever fire becomes part of celebration. A slight crackle interrupts the silence. One candle burns faster than expected, tilting dangerously. The father quickly pinches it out with a small metal snuffer. The children barely register the interruption. They are too enraptured by the rest of the tree. A tiny spark of adrenaline moves through the adults, but then the moment passes. The flame's beauty returns along with its reminder of risk. As you leave the room, the mother hands you a small candle she keeps for tradition's sake. It is short, uneven, and smells faintly of beeswax. Families kept these leftover candles tucked into drawers for months, believing they carried a sliver of holiday magic long after Christmas had passed. You continue down the road, drawn toward a brighter, steadier light emanating from another home. When you enter, you find a family standing proudly beneath their tree, which glows not with flame but with tiny electric bulbs. They look almost like captured stars, shimmering in gentle clusters. The room feels warmer, calmer. No one watches the tree with nervous attention. Instead, the children play freely beneath it, their minds unburdened by what might catch fire. The father explains proudly that they are one of the first homes in the neighborhood with electricity. He gestures upward at the newly installed ceiling fixture, which hums faintly. Strings of bulbs run along the tree in neat loops. Some flicker inconsistently, a reminder that the system is far from perfect. Documents circulated within local communities at the time make it unmistakable that early electric service was unpredictable, available to some families, but not to others, often depending on distance from new power stations. The little girl of the house invites you to look closely at one of the bulbs. It glows with a faint halo, warm but not hot. She tells you she no longer has to stand far away from the tree. She can sit beside it for as long as she likes reading stories or playing with her doll. The freedom makes her beam with pride. Nearby, her older brother tells you that their uncle was skeptical of electric lights, insisting the bulbs looked unnatural and the wires too messy. Something unexpectedly whimsical appeared in certain households, where families mixed electric bulbs with candles not for safety but because they missed the flicker of fire. In this home, though, they have embraced the new, fully marvelling at how effortlessly the tree gleams. You wander toward the mantel where a string of lights drapes loosely among sprigs of evergreen. The bulbs cast a soft golden wash, but occasionally dim for a heartbeat before brightening again. Everyone sighs in unison when it happens, as though expecting the entire room to fall into darkness, yet the lights endure. The father assures his children they will glow all night, unless of course the wind knocks something loose along the line outside. As the conversation flows, another family arrives for a brief visit. They step inside and gasp at the electric lights. One woman covers her mouth with her gloved hand, astonished. She asks whether the bulbs are dangerous to touch, whether wires might spark, whether the house could suddenly brighten too much. Her questions come rapid and breathless. The host patiently demonstrates the safety of the bulbs, letting her tap one gently with her fingertip. She exhales, visibly relieved. You soon leave the electric home behind and walk through the snowy street once more. Many houses flicker with candlelight. A few glow steadily with electric bulbs. Some remain dark, saving fuel for morning. The variety gives the neighborhood a patchwork quality, every window a different chapter of the same evolving story. Further along, you encounter a group of men on ladders adjusting lanterns fixed to tall posts. They speak quietly, passing tools hand to hand. The lanterns glow with warm gaslight, illuminating the street in long golden stripes. One of the workers pauses to shake snow from his coat. He tells you proudly that these new posts reduce the number of accidents on winter nights. Civic reports compiled during the decade strongly point to improvements in street safety as gas and electric lighting expanded. You thank him for his work and continue your stroll. Lamps shine above you, candles flicker behind curtains, electric bulbs wink in tiny constellations. All of it mixes into one calm, shimmering portrait of a holiday in transition. The snowy silence deepens as you walk, giving you space to reflect. Within academic conversations, contrasting viewpoints persist regarding whether electric lighting diminished the enchantment of candlelit traditions or simply shifted it into a new form. As you look at the glowing homes, you feel that the magic persists, just expressed differently through human hands adapting to new possibilities. Ahead the air grows colder, snow thickens, and you sense that the landscape is about to grow harsher, guiding you into the realities of winter hardship that shaped life beyond the glow of holiday lights. You leave the lane of glowing windows behind, stepping into a stretch of countryside where the wind bites harder and the snow deepens into uneven drifts. The air feels sharper here, carrying the raw scent of frozen soil and distant wood smoke. Above you, the sky stretches wide and pale, with faint stars barely piercing the winter haze. As you pull your coat tighter, you begin to sense how profoundly the elements shape the season for families living far from the warmth of crowded cities or the comfort of well-supplied neighborhoods. A narrow road winds ahead, flanked by fields concealed beneath layers of snow. Wooden fences peek through in slanted lines, their rails heavy with frost. You hear the squeak and crunch of each step you take, a lonely sound against the vast quiet. After a time, you notice a small farmhouse leaning against the horizon, its windows dim. Smoke rises from the chimney in slow, uncertain curls, as though the fire inside struggles to keep pace with the cold. When you step inside, a rush of heat greets you, though the air remains tinged with chill. A family sits, gathered near the stove, their faces drawn close to the warmth. A pot hangs above the fire, simmering with something simple and hearty. The father stands, holding a bucket of melting snow, ready to pour more into the pot when needed. Evidence embedded in everyday account books suggests clearly that winter water access demanded constant ingenuity. Wells froze. Pumps stiffened, and hauling buckets from distant springs became a daily test of endurance. The children sit wrapped in blankets, playing with small carved toys near the hearth. The mother mends a wool sock, fingers stiff from cold despite the fire's glow. She smiles at you and gestures toward a chair. You sit gratefully, letting the heat seep slowly into your bones. The family is preparing for Christmas, but everything they do is filtered through the pressing reality of winter itself. Outside, you hear the wind scrape against the walls. The father explains that last night's storm knocked over part of their fence, and he will need to repair it tomorrow despite the cold. Snowdrifts pile against the barn, threatening to block the doors if left unchecked. Something unexpectedly whimsical appeared in certain households, where children shaped drifting snow into protective barriers, believing the walls kept spirits or bad luck at bay. One of the children pipes up now, proudly announcing that he will build the biggest snow wall tomorrow to help keep the animals warm. His father ruffles his hair, the gesture a mix of humour and gratitude. A soft knock at the door interrupts the moment. A neighbour enters, brushing snow from his cap, his coat stiff with ice. He brings news of the frozen creek and warns that travel beyond the hill has become risky. Roads have vanished beneath deep drifts. Many travellers have postponed plans altogether. In rural communities like this, one winter's grip shapes not only daily survival, but also the contours of holiday gatherings. The neighbour accepts a cup of hot broth and sits by the stove. He speaks of his own preparations, splitting wood before dawn, checking the roof for ice damage, wrapping cloth around the windows to block drafts. His words paint a picture of relentless effort, a rhythm dictated by weather rather than celebration. As the conversation continues, the mother opens a small crate near the wall, revealing dried apples and stored potatoes. She explains that the harvest was modest this year, but they have enough to make a simple Christmas meal. Writers of the era often remarked that winter meals depended heavily on preserved goods, with fresh produce considered a rare luxury. The mother holds up a jar of berries preserved in syrup, saving it for Christmas morning as if it were a precious jewel. You step outside for a moment, drawn by the shifting sound of the wind. The cold hits you sharply. Snow swirls in restless spirals, collecting along the corners of the house. A wooden water pump stands nearby, frozen in place. You touch it briefly, feeling the sting of the metal. The challenges of winter become unmistakable, every task magnified, every misstep a potential danger. In the distance, you notice another farmhouse. Its windows flicker as though the family inside moves from room to room, tending to lamps and feeding wood into stoves. A faint howl of wind passes through the trees. You walk toward the house, snow muffling your steps. Inside, you find a family crouched near the door, fastening heavy cloth across the bottom seam to block cold air. The father mutters about the draft getting worse this winter. The children help by pushing small cushions against the corners. It is a cooperative effort performed with practiced precision. On a table near the wall sits a wooden trough filled with snow that is slowly melting. This family uses it to gather water for washing dishes. Above it hangs a string of drying herbs. The mother explains that she has saved as many herbs as possible from the autumn garden to flavour what little food remains. A peculiar micro-tradition surfaced among a handful of families who hung small bundles of aromatic herbs over their beds during winter nights, believing the scent kept illness at bay. She gestures to a bundle above her daughter's cot with a proud nod. A teenage son enters with a shovel cheeks flushed from the cold. He explains that he has been clearing a path to the barn because the cows must be fed before dawn. You sense the weight of responsibility in his voice, something pressed early into his life by the demands of rural winter. The father pulls up a chair, joining the conversation. He speaks of past winters, recalling storms that lasted for days and nights when they huddled together for warmth. Informal letters from rural families frequently highlight that Christmas celebrations often relied more on endurance and togetherness than on decoration. The father's expression softens as he describes a childhood Christmas spent in a one-room cabin, with nothing but a candle and a handful of nuts to mark the occasion, yet with laughter he still remembers vividly. You sip a small cup of warm tea offered by the mother, its flavour faint but comforting. A child curls against her side, half asleep. The dog near the stove sighs with contentment, paws twitching as though dreaming of warmer months. As the family settles into quieter activities, you step outside once more, letting the door close gently behind you. Snowflakes drift in larger, slower clusters. The moon emerges briefly from behind thick clouds, painting the landscape in a pale glow. The vastness of the night reminds you how small each home feels in such conditions, each one a fragile patch of warmth fighting against the cold. Those analysing weather records of the period frequently dispute how severe winters truly were compared to modern ones. Some claim these storms built legendary hardships. Others suggest memory exaggerated the difficulty. As you observe the labour, the resourcefulness and the resilience required simply to endure, you sense that truth lies somewhere between raw data and lived experience. Your journey continues down the lonely road, guided by faint traces of lamplight flickering from distant windows. Ahead, the snow-packed alleys begin narrowing, the rooftops lowering, and chimney smoke thickening into fog. You sense you are approaching the tenements, places where winter presses hardest, and Christmas takes on a different, often harsher shape. You step deeper into the narrow streets until the tidy lines of fences and well-spaced homes give way to taller, crowded buildings pressed shoulder to shoulder. Laundry lines hang stiff with ice stairways, creak with age, and the scent of coal smoke clings to every brick. This is the tenement district where families live stacked upon one another in cramped rooms, sharing walls that whisper every footstep and cough. The air feels heavier here, not simply from the winter cold, but from the weight of daily struggle woven into every doorway. You push open a splintered front door and climb a dim stairwell lit only by a single oil lamp fixed to the wall. Its flame wavers in the draught, casting long wavering shadows. The hall is narrow enough that you feel the cold from the exterior walls pressing inward. As you ascend, the sounds of life grow louder, children laughing in bursts, a pot clattering onto a stove, someone humming softly through thin plaster. On the third floor, a family welcomes you into their tiny home warmed by a small stove burning low to save coal. If one examines church rosters and civic bulletins from the era, it becomes evident that many tenement families depended heavily on donated fuel to endure winter. This family has just enough to keep the chill away, but not enough to be generous with heat. Everyone stays close to the stove, wrapped in shawls and patched coats, grateful for whatever comfort the fire gives. The room is scarcely large enough for the table, the bed, and the few crates that serve as chairs. Still, the mother has decorated it lovingly. A small branch of evergreen clings to the wall above the stove, tied with a scrap of red cloth. A paper star hangs from a string near the window, fluttering slightly whenever a draft slips past the frame. The children beam with pride when you admire it. One strangely endearing micro-custom appeared among certain families who used bits of newspaper dipped in flour paste to create makeshift stars, believing the shimmering appearance brought good fortune. The star above the stove gleams faintly with that improvised gloss. The father sits beside the table repairing a wooden toy that he carved on his rare day off. It is shaped like a horse, though the legs are uneven and the paint chipped. He sands the rough edges with a small scrap of cloth. The younger child watches him eagerly, bouncing slightly in anticipation. She will receive the toy tomorrow morning, though she already knows what it is. The delight lies not in surprise, but in the care poured into it. The mother ladles a thin soup into chipped bowls. The fragrance is humble but warm, filled with potatoes, onions, and a hint of salt. She apologizes softly for the simplicity, but you shake your head. The steam rising from the bowls fills the room with a sense of comfort, something desperately valuable in tight quarters. The children eat quickly, savouring each spoonful. As they finish, the mother retrieves a box tucked beneath the bed. Inside lie several postcards from relatives living in other parts of the city. Though the cards are old and smudged, the children treat them like treasures. They take turns holding them to the lamplight, admiring the faded illustrations. Contemporary descriptions found in neighbourhood circulars consistently point toward the importance of small paper tokens in tenement communities, where even brief messages from loved ones softened the difficulty of daily life. A soft knock sounds at the door. When the father opens it, a neighbour steps inside carrying a pot wrapped in cloth. She offers it sheepishly and explains that she made extra dumplings tonight. The mother accepts with gratitude, and the two women embrace in a short, quiet gesture that speaks volumes. Tenement life often required an unspoken network of mutual care. Even when families had little, they shared what they could. In the hallway you hear footsteps and muffled laughter. Curious, you step outside. Several children from different apartments have gathered together playing a simple game with pebbles arranged in a circle on the floorboards. They invite you to watch. Their joy radiates despite the cold seeping through gaps in the walls. A teenager keeps an eye on them, gently reminding them not to shout too loudly and wake the baby 2 floors down. You continue exploring the building, pausing to observe small glimpses of life. A woman washes clothes in a basin, her hands red from icy water. A man sits near a window writing a letter by lamplight, pausing frequently to warm his fingers before continuing. A young couple murmurs together about their hopes for the coming year, speaking so quietly you can barely catch the words. Deeper inside, you locate a communal kitchen where a few residents take turns baking simple loaves of bread. The oven gives off enough heat to fog the small room. One man kneads dough with rhythmic care, dusting flour from his sleeves as he shapes the loaves. He explains proudly that the bread is for everyone on the floor. His generosity surprises you, though he brushes off your admiration. It's just what we do, he says with a shrug that reveals both modesty and pride. You venture outside briefly to breathe in the cold air. Frost forms along the edges of the doorway. The tenement's exterior stairs sag under the weight of snow. Across the courtyard, another family hangs damp laundry, despite the freezing temperature, hoping the air will at least dry it a little before stiffening the cloth. A group of women stands near a barrel fire in the courtyard, sharing news about rising food prices and the latest steamship arrivals. Researchers comparing regional sources continue to diverge sharply over how tenement families balanced hardship with festive spirit, yet watching these neighbours converse you sense resilience thrumming beneath every word. They speak of challenges without despair, weaving their hopes into the cold night like a fragile but enduring thread. Back inside, you return to the family who first welcomed you. The children have curled up on their bed, drifting towards sleep beneath the thin but cherished quilt their grandmother made years ago. The mother smooths the fabric gently, humming a tune she learnt in childhood. The father adds one last piece of coal to the stove, watching the flame catch before securing the grate. The room glows softly, every shadow cushioned by warmth. Though modest, this space pulses with a quiet dignity. The holiday may not fill it with abundance, but it fills it with tenderness. You step into the hallway again and descend the stairs, hearing the murmur of voices behind every door. Snow continues falling outside, softening the edges of the buildings and muting the harshness of the world. Ahead beyond the tenement district, you sense a different kind of gathering. A celebration rooted in heritage and hope, shaped by triumph and endurance. Your path leads toward African American communities, preparing their own winter traditions rich with music, faith, and resilience. You make your way beyond the crowded tenement blocks, following a quieter street that slopes gently downward. The snow here seems deeper, more pristine, as if the wind has spared this neighborhood its usual rough sweep. Soft lamplight spills from windows framed in evergreen sprigs and hand-stitched curtains. As you approach, you hear voices rising in warm, steady harmonies, notes layered with soulfulness that reverberates through the winter air like a heartbeat. You have entered an African-American community preparing its own holiday traditions shaped by faith, food song, and generations of resilience. You step into the first home greeted by a rush of warmth and the scent of slow-cooked greens mingling with ginger and cloves. A grandmother stirs a pot on the stove, humming a tune whose melody bends and sways with quiet strength. Household diaries tucked in family trunks sometimes reveal with striking clarity that music served as a lifeline in African American communities during this era, offering both comfort and a means of shared identity. Tonight, the melody drifts through every corner of the room, turning labour into something gentler. Children sit at a corner table, threading popcorn and cranberries, with concentrated delight. The littlest one pricks her finger, then laughs through the sting, and keeps working. The older siblings guide her hands, showing her how to loop the string without breaking the kernels. Their garland grows slowly, winding into a coil that will later crown the Christmas tree standing proudly in the parlour. The tree itself is adorned in a mixture of decorations, paper chains, dried orange slices, tin cutouts shaped by a neighbour who works in a foundry. An unexpected touch of whimsy crept into tradition whenever children pressed pennies into soft pine branches, for good luck, believing the coins would inspire prosperity in the coming year. You see 3 pennies gleaming faintly among the needles, now each one placed by small hands with big hopes. A group of women sits near the hearth, preparing ingredients for tomorrow's feast. They laugh, share stories, and swap recipes passed down orally through generations. One woman crushes spices with a wooden pestle, releasing warm aromas that fill the room. Another kneads dough for sweet rolls, her hands strong and practiced. The conversation flows easily, family news, church plans, small triumphs, private griefs, all woven together with the rhythm of preparation. The door opens and a young man enters carrying a wooden crate. He brushes snow from his coat and reveals what he has brought: yams, molasses, and a bundle of collard greens. Everyone cheers softly. Doctors and teachers writing at the time often remarked upon the fact that for many African American families, gathering enough seasonal ingredients required long, careful planning. Winter scarcity made each fresh item feel like a treasure. The grandmother lifts her head from the stove and breaks into a grin. She embraces the young man, thanking him. He shrugs shyly, explaining he traded extra firewood earlier in the day to a farmer on the outskirts of town. The grandmother nods, impressed by his resourcefulness. In the parlour, an older gentleman tunes a well-worn guitar. He plucks a few notes, adjusting the pegs, until a warm, resonant tone fills the space. Soon he begins a slow, spiritual, his voice deep and steady, the kind that seems to carry the weight of memory within each note. Family members gather around him, some singing softly, others simply listening. The youngest children sway gently, lulled by the cadence. A middle-aged woman leads another song, clapping a rhythm that sparks energy around the room. Her voice is powerful, rising confidently into the rafters. Those listening join in, forming harmonies that vibrate with emotional richness. The music blends sorrow and joy, forming something whole out of experiences that once were fractured. You slip into the kitchen where a few men are discussing the upcoming church service. One of them explains that tomorrow's gathering will include testimonies, music and readings meant to honour both faith and the strength of community. Judging from agricultural almanacs and local registries, there is little doubt that church life served as the social anchor for African American families in the early 20th century, offering not just spiritual guidance, but also education, camaraderie, and protection against the trials of segregation. A teenage boy interrupts the conversation with a shy grin. He has crafted a tiny wooden nativity scene for the church and shyly asks the men if they think it will look presentable. They admire it with sincere pride, praising his craftsmanship. He blushes under their encouragement, promising to sand the rough edges before morning. Back in the parlour, the grandmother lifts a tray of freshly baked cornbread, setting it near the window to cool. The smell fills the room, warm and familiar. Children drift toward the tray like bees to flowers. She shoos them gently, telling them to wait just a little longer. Their disappointed sighs make everyone laugh. A young girl takes your hand and guides you to the small piano beside the window. She plays a halting melody, her fingers careful on the worn keys. The entire room falls quiet to listen. Her mother watches her with deep pride. At the end of the song, applause breaks out, the kind that fills a child's heart with enough courage to keep practicing for years. Later in the evening, another family member arrives with news from down the block: a neighbouring household has lost heat. Without hesitation, several adults gather extra wood blankets and food to deliver. The grandmother remarks softly that helping one another is simply what they do. A modest but peculiar ritual gained quiet popularity in the community when families began attaching a small ribbon to their doorposts if they needed help during winter nights. You notice a single ribbon tied across the door of the house being mentioned. No words required, only presence. As the night wears on, the family draws closer to the fire. The conversation becomes quieter, more reflective. A few people speak softly about relatives who live far away, about old wounds, healing slowly about dreams they hope the coming year might allow. Children doze against adults' shoulders. The guitar's last notes fade gently into silence. Stepping back outside, you hear muffled singing rise from another home nearby. The sound is low-layered, rich notes born from history, sorrow, and profound resilience. Snowflakes land on your coat, melting instantly with the warmth still soaking through you from inside the house. As you continue walking, you reflect on the traditions you've just witnessed, grounded in faith, strengthened by shared labour, alive with music and generosity. Historians poring over fragmented records seldom agree on how to measure the emotional depth of these gatherings, but standing here under the winter sky, you feel it unmistakably, an unbroken thread of connection running through voices, hands, and hearts. Ahead, the path bends toward another legacy of resilience. Indigenous winter ceremonies where ancient traditions meet the weight of forced change. The night seems to quiet itself once more, preparing you to enter those sacred spaces. You continue down the snow-softened road until the town's lights shrink behind you, and the landscape opens into quiet stretches of forest and field. The air feels different here, calmer, as if the land itself exhales in long, patient breaths. You follow a narrow path bordered by cedar and birch, their branches bending under the weight of fresh snow. Soon you notice faint plumes of smoke rising through the trees and hear low rhythmic drumming drifting through the cold air. It is steady heartbeat-like, guiding you toward a gathering shaped by traditions far older than the nation surrounding them. You emerge into a clearing where an indigenous community has assembled for winter ceremonials. Firelight flickers across faces, warming the night with amber glow. People stand in small groups wrapped in blankets, adorned with patterns representing stories, clans, and ancestors. Children play beside the fire, leaping through patches of snow, their laughter rising above the drumbeat. Adults move with a gentle deliberateness, preparing offerings of food and tobacco. From the few surviving oral histories recorded sympathetically at the time, one can sense how winter rituals anchored communities, spiritually reaffirming identity during a season often marked by imposed hardship. An elder greets you softly and gestures for you to draw closer to the fire. You sit on a woven mat, feeling warmth seep upward through the cold. The elder explains that tonight's gathering blends traditional winter observances with newer practices introduced by missionaries. His tone carries both acceptance and quiet sorrow. Many families have woven these layers together with care, preserving what they can while respecting the changes forced upon them. Nearby, a young woman prepares cedar branches, laying them gently in a bowl. As the smoke rises, she wafts it toward each person, murmuring words in her language. The scent is sharp and calming. A tiny, almost secretive, eccentric practice took shape in households that saved these cleaned cedar sprigs to place beneath pillows, believing they brought protective dreams through the coldest nights. You see one child tuck a sprig into the pocket of his coat, glancing around shyly as he does so. A group gathers near a drum, its surface decorated with carefully painted symbols. The drummers strike in unison, creating a low vibration that settles into your bones. Each beat seems to expand the boundaries of the night, carrying memory and meaning across time. Children sway gently, trying to mimic the subtle movements of their elders. The fire crackles in harmony, sparks lifting into the sky like tiny ascending stars. Inside a nearby lodge, families arrange bowls of food for a communal feast. You step in and feel the air shift to something fragrant and warm. Roasted meats, berries, corn, and root vegetables fill the room with a comforting scent. Women stir pots over small fires, speaking softly in their language. One woman explains that the meal honours both the season and those who came before. Judging from agricultural almanacs and local registries, there is little doubt that winter food in indigenous villages often depended on meticulous preparation months earlier, drying, smoking, and storing harvest to sustain the community through bitter weather. A young man enters, brushing snow from his shoulders. He carries a wooden container filled with painted stones. He places the stones near the fire, explaining that they represent prayers made throughout the year. People approach one by one, adding their own quietly. This ritual blends older ceremonial meaning with portions of symbolism introduced by Christian influence. The melding feels neither forced nor seamless, more like a careful weaving stitched by hands, determined to hold on to as many threads as possible. Children gather around a storyteller whose voice carries clearly through the lodge. He describes ancient tales of winter spirits, animal helpers, and the long-ago journeys of ancestors. His gestures are slow and expressive, turning the air into a canvas of movement. The children lean closer, eyes bright. Adults listen too, though their expressions shift between nostalgia and something more solemn. Within the field, competing hypotheses persist concerning how much of these stories survived intact through decades of cultural suppression. Listening now, you sense both resilience and loss folded together. Later a hymn begins outside quiet, at first sung in a language reshaped by missionary schooling. But as elders join, the sound transforms, rising in rich layers that carry both traditional cadence and new tonal patterns. You feel the complex weight of history inside that blending of voices. The elder who greeted you earlier returns with a bowl carved from birch. Inside is a portion of stew, simple yet deeply flavorful. He tells you that sharing food during winter ceremonies is both nourishment and remembrance. The broth warms you, immediately seeping into your chest until the cold outside feels distant. A baby cries softly and the mother lifts the child, wrapping him in a blanket patterned in blues and reds. An older woman rocks the child, gently humming a lullaby that dips and rises like drifting snow. Her voice smooths the air with tenderness, each note carrying layers of memory. Outside, the fire grows higher. People move around it in a slow circle, singing in quiet unison. Their footsteps pack patterns into the snow. Some faces gleam with tears, others glow with contentment. The ceremony acknowledges hardship without letting it eclipse hope. You step back to observe the clearing. The firelight paints long shadows on the snow, shaping an ever-shifting landscape of silhouettes. The stars above have sharpened into bright points, watching silently. The drumming resumes steady, resonant grounding. One elder takes a moment to speak about the coming year. His voice is soft yet firm. He talks of healing, of change, of the need to hold on to what has endured. The younger listeners nod deeply, absorbing the weight of his words. As the night draws deeper, families begin drifting back to their homes. Some carry baskets of leftover food, others cradle sleeping children. The fire dims but continues, glowing embers shimmering like heartbeats in the snow. You remain for a moment, letting the quiet seep into you. This gathering feels both timeless and fragile, like something kept alive through sheer determination. Modern scholarship remains unsettled on the question of how completely winter ceremonies adapted to imposed religious structures, but seeing the devotion here, you sense that adaptation did not erase essence. It transformed it gently, but irreversibly. When you finally step away from the clearing, the path glows faintly in moonlight. The forest exhales its cold breath around you, yet you feel a lingering warmth from the fire and the voices. Ahead lies another world of December life, one shaped by distant horizons, open plains, and the rugged improvisation of the American West. You leave the quiet forest path behind and step into a wide expanse of open land where the wind blows with a kind of sharp authority. The snow here stretches in long, sweeping sheets, unbroken by fences or tall buildings. In the distance, lanterns glow near low wooden structures scattered across the plains, their light pulses faintly hinting at gatherings in places where winter feels larger, harsher, and yet somehow more freeing. You are entering the unsettled edges of the West, where ranches, mining towns, and isolated outposts carve their holidays from whatever the land allows. You make your way first toward a ranch house sitting atop a gentle rise. Horses huddle in the corral below, tails flicking as they shake off snow. Inside the house, the warmth hits you immediately. The living room is filled with the scent of cured leather pine logs and hot coffee. A handful of cowboys sit around the fire boots stretched toward the heat, their hats resting on nearby hooks. Notes kept by local officials at the time make plain that winter holidays on frontier ranches rarely meant taking full days off. Livestock still required feeding, watering, and checking for frostbite. Even tonight, one ranch hand rolls up his sleeves, preparing to head back outside to look in on the horses again. A woman in an apron sets a pot of beans and salted pork on the table. She adds a small dish of dried apples rehydrated earlier in the day. The men thank her with quiet sincerity. Christmas out here leans heavily on preservation and improvisation. Every dish feels like a small victory over distant scarcity and cold. A boy bursts into the room carrying a bundle of sagebrush. He shouts triumphantly that he has found enough to decorate the mantel. Everyone chuckles, not at his excitement, but at the sagebrush itself. Some households added a curious spark to the holiday by transforming whatever shrubs they had on hand into decorations, believing the scent invited good fortune into the home. As the ranch hands eat, they swap stories. One recounts a night when a blizzard forced them to sleep upright in the barn. Another claims he once saw a cougar pacing along the ridge at dusk, its eyes glowing like tiny lanterns. The stories weave together in voices tinged with exhaustion and pride. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, but the fire blazes strong. When you leave the ranch house, you head toward a faint cluster of lights flickering near the foothills. The air grows sharper, and the snow crunches louder underfoot. Gradually, shapes emerge: rough cabins and small shops pressed close together. This is a mining town, its heartbeat strong even in winter. Lamps burn late because many miners work irregular shifts, emerging from the earth long after the sky has gone dark. You step into a saloon, the only building glowing brightly on the street. Inside, the heat swirls with the smell of tobacco sawdust and strong spirits. A group of miners clusters around a wooden table playing cards with thick calloused fingers. Others gather near the bar, swapping jokes between sips. A fiddle player sits atop a barrel, coaxing lively rhythms from his instrument, while a few patrons tap their heels in time. The saloon is decorated with whatever the community could gather: pine branches, strips of cloth tied into loops, and a few tarnished ornaments donated by the shopkeeper's wife. In one corner stands a tree that leans slightly supported by a pile of rocks. Despite its uneven shape, the men admire it proudly, knowing how hard it was to drag it down the mountain path. Contemporaneous community newsletters quietly acknowledge that miners living in harsh conditions relied on moments like these to carve emotional space from the grind of their labour. A young woman serving drinks pauses to chat with you. She says the town has grown quieter over the years as mines yield less, and young men drift elsewhere in search of better wages. Still, people here celebrate when they can: music on Christmas Eve, hot stew for everyone on Christmas Day, and gifts exchanged only if practical. She gestures toward a pile of wool socks stacked neatly on a table. These socks, she says, are treasures in winter. No one ever has enough pairs. Suddenly, the saloon door swings open, letting in a blast of cold air and two men carrying a crate. They explain they have just returned from a distant settlement, bringing mail and a small bundle of supplies. The entire room perks up. Letters are passed eagerly from hand to hand. One miner receives a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, he finds a knitted scarf and a short note from his sister. He reads the note twice, folding it with a tenderness that feels rare in a place shaped by hard labour. The music swells again. Someone shouts for the fiddle player to start a Christmas tune. The room erupts with cheer as a lively reel begins. Miners tap their boots, clap their hands, and laugh with a kind of full-bodied joy that momentarily erases the weight of their profession. You leave the saloon and continue uphill, guided by the faint glow of lanterns placed along a steep path. At the crest stands a lonely cabin where a single lamp burns inside. You approach carefully and knock. A man opens the door, surprised but welcoming. His small home contains a pot of stew simmering on the stove, a wool blanket draped across the bed, and a handful of carved wooden figures arranged neatly on a shelf. He invites you in and offers you a seat near the stove. He explains that he is a trapper spending long stretches alone in the wilderness. This cabin is his shelter, his workplace, and his holiday haven. He shows you a collection of pelts drying overhead, and a set of traps lying near the door, cleaned and ready for tomorrow's early journey. Every so often, something delightfully irregular took place. Trappers carved small figurines from leftover wood, gifting them to neighbours or travellers they encountered during winter. He hands you on now a small bird with wings folded close to its body. You turn it in your hands, admiring the crude yet heartfelt craftsmanship. He stirs the stew, then speaks of Christmases past when storms kept him snowed in for days. Sometimes he celebrated alone, sometimes with strangers who happened to cross his path. He describes those nights with surprising fondness. In solitude, small rituals, lighting a single candle, sharing stew with a passing traveller, carving a new figurine, take on profound meaning. As he speaks, the wind outside rises in long, low sighs. Snow gathers against the doorframe in soft heaps. You feel the vastness of the landscape pressing gently against the walls, not with menace but with quiet insistence. The trapper leans back and muses that winter here teaches a person to be patient, humble, and creative. Historians tracing this period through fragmented sources often reach irreconcilable views on whether frontier life fostered loneliness or independence. Listening now, you sense both truths mingling comfortably in the same breath. When you finally step back outside into the cold, the cabin's lantern glows behind you, like a small star anchored to earth. Ahead, the plains stretch wide and silent. You walk until the faint hum of distant voices reappears, voices gathering not for work or survival but for entertainment, laughter, and the simple joy of passing time together. You follow the sound toward a settlement where homes cluster more closely, anticipating an evening rich, with performances, parlor games, and early technology that dazzles the imagination. The path ahead glimmers invitingly. You follow the faint music drifting across the plains until the night opens into a small settlement whose houses glow with an inviting warmth. The streets are lined with lanterns perched on wooden posts, their light quivering slightly as the winter wind tries to unsettle them. As you draw closer, you can hear laughter echoing from porches, glimpses of voices rising excitedly above the hush of falling snow. This part of the West may be young, but its people are eager to fill long winter nights with creativity, mischief, and shared delight. Social gatherings become the spark that keeps isolation from settling too deeply into their bones. You step into the first house where a lively gathering is already underway. Quilts hang on the walls for both decoration and insulation. A group of neighbours has assembled around a long table cluttered with pies, winter apples, mugs of coffee, and a jug of something far stronger. Children weave between the adults, chasing one another with strings of popcorn, while a dog tries desperately to join the game. In the corner, an amateur magician sets up a small performance. He places 3 wooden cups on the table and hides a pebble beneath one of them. The room grows quiet with anticipation. As he moves the cups swiftly, his hands surprisingly nimble. Patterns recorded in travel logs from the period demonstrate that communities on the frontier often relied on homegrown entertainers to supply holiday amusement, as trained performers were scarce, and theatres even scarcer. Tonight's magician is clearly a beloved figure. The applause erupts before he even finishes the trick. When he finally reveals the pebble beneath the wrong cup, the children shriek with delight. The adults chuckle knowingly. The dog barks with confusion. The magician bows dramatically, nearly knocking his spectacles from his face. The host of the gathering invites you to join a circle forming near the fireplace. A fiddle player tunes her instrument while her brother readies a set of hand-carved whistles. Soon, a lively reel takes shape. People begin dancing with the kind of unrefined enthusiasm that makes the floorboards tremble. Boots stomp, skirts spin, someone shouts encouragement. The music swells until even the shyest guests tap their feet in rhythm. In a quieter corner, a small group gathers around a stereoscope, a marvellous contraption that transforms flat photographs into scenes that feel 3-dimensional. Children take turns peering through the lenses, gasping each time the world suddenly expands. A slender thread of whimsy wound through the season whenever families traded stereograph cards, showing snowy mountains, bustling cities, or faraway coastlines. Tonight, a young boy insists he's discovered a secret doorway in the image, and no one bothers to correct him. When the music slows, the furniture is rearranged for a parlour game. Long strips of paper are distributed, and everyone writes a word or phrase secretly before tossing it into a hat. The host draws one slip at a time, and players must act out the phrase without speaking. The miners, ranch hands, schoolteachers, and homesteaders who fill the room roar with laughter as their neighbours attempt dramatic scenes of midnight rooster storm blowing sideways and cowboy with cold feet. After several rounds, the room quiets for storytelling. A grey-bearded man leans forward, clearing his throat. He recounts the tale of a blizzard that once stranded an entire wagon party. His voice dips and rises with deliberate pacing, capturing every ear in the room. Children huddle closer to their parents. Adults exchange glances, half amused, half spooked. Every so often he embellishes a detail, widening eyes for dramatic effect. Some households kept these embellished stories alive year after year, allowing each narrator to reshape events into a new version of truth, turning hardship into communal legend. Eventually you step outside into the crisp night where another house glows from within. Their neighbours gather for a more refined form of entertainment, an early motion picture show. Indeed, someone has rigged up a small projector, its hand crank gleaming beside the lantern. The image flickers on a sheet hung across the wall. Men, women, and children sit with wide-eyed wonder as grainy figures dance across the screen. Contemporaneous descriptions found in early entertainment bulletins suggest that even the briefest films felt miraculous to those who had never before seen moving images. You settle among them as the projector clicks steadily. Shadowy silhouettes run leap, wave, and vanish. A woman claps when a man in a bowler hat slips comically on a banana peel. A child gasps when a horse gallops directly toward the camera. Adults smile bashfully, pretending not to be amazed. When the film ends, the room erupts in chatter. People speculate about how it works, some confident, others wildly off the mark. A few insist it must be magic. One man claims he saw strings in the shadows, Another declares that the camera must trap ghosts. Academic commentary remains split when addressing how quickly frontier communities adopted motion picture technology, but this room proves at least one thing: wonder spreads fast when the unknown fills the air. You move again to another gathering across the lane, drawn by the hum of competitive energy. A checkerboard sits on a crate, 2 players deep in concentration. Spectators lean over their shoulders, whispering advice they pretend is not advice. A pot of coffee sits nearby, refilled every few minutes. In the kitchen, a group prepares midnight snacks, biscuits, molasses candy, and a stew made from leftover elk. Everyone steals pieces of candy when they think no one is looking. Outside the back door, 2 boys attempt a sleigh race down a small slope. The snow is uneven and one sleigh tips over, immediately sending the rider tumbling into a drift. He emerges laughing, shaking clumps of snow from his hair. His friend cheers as though he has witnessed a heroic feat. Near the fence, a girl practices whistling through a blade of grass, insisting she can summon birds if she finds the perfect note. As midnight approaches, the gatherings begin to merge. People spill from one house to another, carrying plates of food, swapping stories and inviting newcomers inside. Lanterns swing gently in the breeze, their glow tracing golden arcs through the darkness. Children show off new tricks they learned earlier in the evening. Adults toast to another year on the frontier, another year of surviving, working, laughing, enduring. Somewhere down the road, the faint echo of a harmonica begins a soft tune. Others hum along. The music floats over the snow like a shared breath. It feels as though the land itself listens. As you walk away from the gatherings, you reflect on the sense of community woven into these nights. Those who study the era encounter repeated contradictions in how to understand frontier sociability, whether it mitigated hardship or concealed it. Tonight, watching strangers become companions under the lantern glow, you sense that both interpretations hold truth. Ahead, the landscape shifts toward darker rooftops and quieter streets. You feel the pull of the next chapter, the solemn warmth of midnight church services, where holiday revelry gives way to reflection prayer and the gentle hush of candlelit devotion. You follow the fading notes of the harmonica into the deeper quiet of the settlement. The rowdy cheer of parlour games and flickering picture show slowly dissolves behind you, replaced by a softer, steadier sound, voices lifted in reverent harmony. The night grows colder, but the music ahead warms the air like rising breath. Soon, you see a modest church set upon a small rise, its steeple pointing toward a sky brushed with pale winter stars. Lanterns line the walkway, their flames trembling in the wind, guiding you toward the doorway. As you enter, warmth envelopes you. The church is small, its wooden beams low and sturdy, its pews crowded with families wrapped in coats and shawls. Candles glow along the windowsills, casting golden halos on the frosted glass. At the front, a simple altar is adorned with pine boughs and a single white cloth. Observations written by early reformers repeatedly underscored that rural congregations relied on creativity, more than ornamentation, fashioning sacred beauty from whatever the land or the season offered. The congregation rises in unison as the minister begins a hymn. Their voices swell together, filling the room with a fullness that seems far larger than the space itself. Some sing strongly, others softly, a few shyly, yet the sound blends into something that feels ancient, like a winter ritual repeated long before the building ever stood. Children fidget in the pews, but join in when they can, their high notes weaving like threads through the deeper tones. The organist plays on a pump organ, slightly out of tune, each note bending upward or downward in small, endearing ways. A young man stands beside it, working the foot pedals with earnest concentration. Every now and then he glances nervously at the minister to ensure he is keeping pace. People smile at his effort, knowing he practiced for weeks to be ready tonight. After the hymn ends, the minister steps forward. His voice carries the steady cadence of someone used to speaking into quiet rooms. He reads passages by lamplight, pausing occasionally to let the words settle. He talks of hope flickering in darkness, of burdens shared, of lives shaped by both joy and hardship. He reminds the congregation that winter is not simply a season to endure, but a moment to reflect on what binds them together. Judging from preserved sermon notes held in small-town archives, ministers of the era often emphasized communal warmth above strict doctrine during Christmas services. A baby's cry breaks the stillness for a moment. The mother rocks the child, gently humming under her breath. Nearby, an elderly couple holds hands, their fingers intertwined beneath a frayed blanket. Young men, still dusted with snow from late chores, sit shoulder to shoulder beside their families. A girl with braids traces patterns on the pew with her mittened fingers, lost in her own world of imagination. Soon a quiet rustle fills the room as children are invited forward for a special reading. They gather near the altar, cheeks flushed from the heat of the crowded space. One girl holds a lantern, its glass etched with swirling designs. She lifts it carefully as the minister explains the symbolism of bringing light into the longest nights of the year. The children listen with wide eyes, some understanding the meaning, others simply mesmerized by the glow. After the reading, a small choir of teenage girls stands to sing a carol. Their voices rise in delicate harmony, each note drifting like soft snowfall. In the second verse, one girl's voice falters slightly, but the others surround her, letting their tones carry her back into the melody. Every so often a faint streak of eccentricity surfaced when the choir proudly inserted a verse from an old regional carol. Their grandparents taught them a blend of languages and rhythms that belonged wholly to this place. Next, the congregation kneels for a moment of silent prayer. The church falls into a deep stillness. Only the low crackle of the stove breaks the quiet. You feel the room settle into a shared breath, a collective pause that honors both sorrow and hope. Tears glisten in a few eyes, though no one feels the need to hide them. When the silence ends, an elder steps forward carrying a small basket. Inside lie pieces of peppermint and walnuts wrapped in paper. He explains with a touch of humor that these treats mark the close of service and the beginning of Christmas morning. Children nearly bounce from their seats as he distributes the sweets down each aisle. Adults accept them with nostalgia, remembering when they too waited eagerly for a single candy on this night. As the final hymn begins, the congregation stands once more. This time their voices sound fuller, as though the service has lifted something within them. The melody rises and falls with gentle conviction, and the wooden rafters echo softly in return. Outside, snow continues to drift past the windows, thickening the world in white serenity. When the minister dismisses the congregation, people linger, shaking hands, exchanging warm wishes and speaking in hushed tones meant to honor the hour. Children show each other their sweets. Neighbors offer rides home in horse-drawn wagons. One family invites another to share breakfast in the morning. You step out onto the porch where lanterns cast soft circles of light into the snow. The congregation disperses along narrow paths, boot prints winding into the darkness. The bells ring a slow, gentle pattern that vibrates faintly in your ribs. You turn to look back at the church one last time. Its windows glow like resting embers beneath the star-brushed sky. As you continue on, a cluster of houses appears in the distance, roofs heavy with snow chimneys releasing steady ribbons of steam. You sense a different kind of hush waiting there, one shaped by families preparing for the magical boundary between Christmas Eve and morning. The night deepens around you, but the warmth of the service stays with you, guiding your steps toward the bedtime rituals unfolding behind countless softly lit windows. You leave the church's warm glow behind and walk toward a narrow lane where houses sit close together, their windows lit with soft amber light. Chimneys sigh steady ribbons of smoke into the night. Inside each home, families prepare for the quietest, gentlest part of the holiday, the moments just before sleep on Christmas Eve. You can sense the shift in energy before you even reach the first porch. Voices lower, lamps dim, footsteps soften, as if the entire neighborhood is settling into a shared hush. You approach a modest cottage where a family gathers in the parlor. The fire burns low, casting long shadows across the braided rug. Children in simple flannel nightshirts sit cross-legged on the floor, trying to stifle yawns while their mother reads aloud from a worn storybook. The father sits in his rocker, mending a small tear in his son's mittens, the needle glinting softly in the firelight. Archival notes kept by travelling ministers quietly reveal that families often carved out these slow, reflective bedtime rituals as a counterbalance to the bustle of the season, allowing the holiday to close with reverence rather than noise. The children listen with half-dreamy attention as the story unfolds, full of winter wanderers, talking animals, and wise old figures who appear in snowy forests. A little girl leans against her older brother's shoulder, her eyelids fluttering. The boy fights sleep a bit longer, determined to catch the final line of the tale. When the mother closes the book, she kisses each child on the forehead and sends them to brush their teeth at the small basin beside the kitchen. The water is cold, but the children accept it without complaint. As they finish, the youngest pulls a small ribbon from her pocket and tucks it beneath her pillow. Holiday life occasionally picked up a playful twist whenever children hid tiny good luck charms under their bedding, believing it invited sweet dreams or special gifts. The mother smiles knowingly, but says nothing. Next, you step into the hallway where the father lights a single candle and carries it upstairs. The soft flame lights the narrow staircase just enough for the family to follow safely. Once in the children's room, he places the candle in a sturdy holder on the dresser. The children climb into bed, pulling the quilt up to their chins. On the wall hangs a simple illustration of a winter star hand drawn earlier in the day. The father murmurs a short blessing, his voice full of gentle sincerity. You quietly exit the cottage as the candle flickers softly behind you. Outside, snow falls in fine even flakes. The night is growing colder, but a kind of peace also gathers in the air, settling gently along rooftops and fences. You walk to the next house, drawn by the muffled sound of a music box. Inside, a family sits around a small table. A mother winds the music box, carefully releasing a delicate tune that fills the room. Two children sway slightly, trying to stay awake long enough to hear the melody all the way through. A dog dozes at their feet, paws twitching in dream. Their father finishes hanging stockings along the mantel, a mix of wool socks and one mismatched sleeve, someone repurposed to avoid leaving any child out. A basket of oranges sits on the table, one for each stocking. A plate of biscuits cools nearby, too precious to touch before morning. A gently peculiar custom spread from house to house, in which families placed one mystery nut at the bottom of the stocking, not for eating, but for predicting luck in the coming year based on its shape. Tonight the father chooses them with careful deliberation. As the children yawn and rub their eyes, the mother wraps a shawl around their shoulders and walks them toward their bedroom. She hums softly, her voice threading the air with tenderness. The father watches with a tired smile, then quietly returns the music box to its shelf. In the home across the lane, an older couple sits near the fire, finishing a simple cup of warm milk, flavoured with a bit of cinnamon. They speak quietly about Christmases long past the ones that held surprises, the ones shaped by lean years, the ones marked by absence or joy. Their room is filled with small reminders of decades lived together, a quilt pieced from scraps of old clothing, a rocking chair, with a repaired arm, a faded portrait of a child who now lives far away. Reports penned by regional observers in that decade repeatedly remarked upon how older adults often used Christmas Eve to revisit memories not out of melancholy, but as a way of softening the year's burdens before sleep. The woman picks up a small knitted pouch and tucks a note inside. She explains to her husband that the note contains her wish for the coming year. He smiles and prepares his own. They place both pouches beneath their pillows, a ritual they have shared for as long as either can remember. A few houses down, you find a larger family preparing for bed with more chaotic energy. Children scurry around, retrieving forgotten socks, teddy bears, and scraps of paper with lists they refuse to throw away. The mother counts heads twice to make sure everyone is present. The father tries to maintain order, but his attempts only fuel the children's laughter. Eventually, with much negotiation, he convinces them to settle into bed. He then sits on the edge of one bunk and tells a final story, this time improvised. Characters appear and vanish on whims. Plot points twist unexpectedly. The children giggle at every surprise. Certain families developed a light-hearted odd habit of encouraging fathers to invent new stories, yearly believing the freshness kept good spirits hovering around the house. Tonight's tale wanders delightfully, ending with a rooster who learns to pull a sled. When the children finally drift to sleep, the parents tiptoe downstairs. They place a few modest gifts on a chair by the tree, a doll with yarn hair, a wooden puzzle, a pair of mittens, a book of fables. They stand for a moment admiring the tree, breathing quietly in the glow of its candles. Then they extinguish the flames one by one, leaving only the fireplace to light the room. Stepping outside again, you walk toward the final homes along the lane. Here a mother sits near a crib, rocking her infant gently. The baby stirs, then settles, lulled by the rhythm of her voice. She hums a tune inherited from her grandmother, a lullaby carried across generations. In another home, an apprentice blacksmith lies awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters. He keeps a small journal on his nightstand where he records his thoughts, hoping to capture some meaning from the season. Researchers drawing from scattered testimony frequently propose clashing interpretations of how working youths experience Christmas Eve, whether they felt hopeful, lonely, or simply exhausted. Watching him now, you sense all three emotions intertwined. Finally, the neighborhood grows still. Firelight dims, doors latch softly. The snow continues its gentle descent. A sense of expectancy pools in the quiet, a collective inhale before morning rises. You continue walking, following a faint glow on the horizon. In the distance, barns, farmhouses, and open fields wait beneath a sky ready to brighten. Dawn will soon break across America, revealing how families greet the long-awaited morning. You walk onward beneath the pale hush of the night until the horizon begins to lighten with a faint silvery glow. A few stars still cling to the sky, but their sharpness softens as dawn draws near. Snowflakes drift more slowly now, as if preparing for the quiet unveiling of Christmas morning across farms, towns, and cities alike. The world gradually shifts from dreaming to waking, and you feel yourself moving with it, drawn toward the first stirrings inside the nearest farmhouse. Through the frosted window, you see a family already rising. Lamps are being lit, casting circles of gold across wooden floors. Children shuffle sleepily from their beds, cheeks pink from the cold. The mother wraps a shawl around her shoulders and stokes the fire, coaxing it from embers to flame. As warmth renews the room, the smell of oats simmering and bread reheating begins to fill the air. If one studies the few surviving ledgers compiled by early social workers, it becomes strikingly apparent that most rural families faced winter mornings with quiet determination, especially on holidays when chores still waited despite celebration. The youngest child rushes toward a small chair where last night's stockings hang loosely. He pauses just long enough to look at his siblings before peeking inside. A delighted gasp escapes him as he draws out an orange, a peppermint stick, and a tiny carved whistle. His older sister inspects her own stocking, carefully pulling out wool mittens knitted by her mother. Their father smiles fondly, watching the simple joy brighten the room. In the corner, the family's modest Christmas tree stands proudly, its paper chains curled slightly from the heat of the fire. A few humble gifts rest beneath its branches: wooden toys, books, a small tin of sweets made during the harvest months. Before anyone touches them, the father gathers the children around and offers a brief word of gratitude. The scene feels gentle and unforced, shaped by the family's own rhythm rather than ceremony. You step outside again, following the melody of excited voices rising from nearby homes. Across the lane, another family has opened their door to let the crisp morning air in. Their children tumble out into the snow, still in their nightclothes, eager to test the sleds waiting beside the porch. Certain families developed a light-hearted odd habit of allowing children to sled before breakfast on Christmas morning, believing the cold air sharpened appetites and spirits alike. You watch two siblings race toward the nearest hill, their laughter trailing behind them like a bright ribbon. A few houses away, a widow living alone receives visitors bearing warm bread and a small basket of preserves. She hugs each neighbour, as though welcoming sunshine into her doorway. They share a brief meal with her before moving along, promising to return later. She watches them leave with misted eyes, comforted by the sense of belonging that still surrounds her. In the heart of the town, the celebrations unfold with a different cadence. Church bells ring softly, calling early worshippers to morning service. Families walk through the snow in small clusters, exchanging greetings with sleepy smiles. Children clutch their presents, simple dolls, penny picture books, small games, proudly showing them to friends along the path. A toy shop, though closed, displays a window filled with miniature sleighs and tin soldiers that sparkle in the daylight. Inside, the shopkeeper counts his remaining stock writing notes in a small ledger. He glances at a postcard displayed near the counter, one sent by his brother from across the ocean. Local board minutes preserved in town hall suggest with gentle certainty that many small shopkeepers depended on Christmas sales to support their families through the harsher months ahead, making this morning a mix of relief and modest celebration. A little further on, a baker pulls fresh loaves from his oven, the aroma drifting sharply into the street. He hands a loaf to a young boy waiting outside with bare hands tucked beneath his coat. The boy beams, offering a small drawing he made in exchange. The baker accepts it tenderly, promising to hang it in his window. The sound of distant laughter draws you toward an open field where several families gather for a friendly snowshoe race. Adults and children alike strap on wooden frames with practiced movements. Music drifts from a fiddle as someone tests a lively tune. Spectators clap as runners begin shuffling across the snow, their feet moving in long, sweeping strides. The race ends in a heap of joyful chaos, everyone collapsing into drifts as the fiddle's melody swirls around them. As the sun rises higher, light glints off rooftops and icicles in sparkling flashes. Smoke trails from chimneys like thin banners of celebration. The entire landscape brightens into a morning that feels fresh and hopeful, as though winter has paused its severity for a day. Yet not every scene is joyous. Toward the edge of town, a factory whistle blows. A handful of workers trudge toward the building. Shoulders hunch their breath, fogging in steady puffs. Modern analysts working through limited evidence often outline incompatible readings of how widespread Christmas Day labour truly was, whether it was a rare burden or a common reality. Watching these workers now, you sense the quiet resignation mixed with dignity as they choose to earn needed wages rather than join the festivities. Nearby, a young mother stands by a window holding her infant close. She watches her neighbours head off to family gatherings with a mixture of contentment and wistfulness. She hums softly to her child, promising that next Christmas will be easier, warmer, fuller. Her voice seems to warm the cold morning air around her. You continue walking until the town gives way to gentle fields. The snow glitters under the rising sun. The world feels clean, touched by renewal. Christmas morning in 1900 stretches across farmhouses and cities alike, stitched from threads of joy, hardship, gratitude, and hope. Ahead, another glow waits not of morning light, but of tables filling with food, laughter, and clattering dishes. Christmas supper is beginning to take shape across America, inviting you toward the next chapter of the day. You follow the brightening morning into midday, letting the chill soften as the sun climbs higher in the winter sky. All around you, the sounds of Christmas shift once again, doors opening, pans, clanging voices calling family members inside. The day now leans toward its most communal moment when households gather around tables laid with whatever abundance or simplicity the year has allowed. You walk toward the nearest farmhouse, drawn by the scent of roasting meat drifting through the crisp air. Inside, the kitchen swells with warmth. Steam fogs the windows. The mother stirs a pot of gravy while the eldest daughter arranges slices of bread on a wooden board. The father carries in a platter of roasted chicken, proud of its golden skin. Pocket diaries written by apprentices of the time often recorded the fact that Christmas meals represented a rare moment of culinary indulgence shaped by months of planning and saving. Today's spread, though modest, feels celebratory in every detail. Children dart through the room, whispering excitedly, their hands occasionally sneaking a piece of carrot or a pinch of biscuit dough. A toddler clings to her mother's skirts, entranced by the bustle of preparations. A neighbour arrives, carrying a small jar of pickled beets as her offering for the meal. She removes her shawl and joins the kitchen crew as though she belongs there every day. In the dining room, the table glows beneath lamplight. A simple cloth covers the surface, its corners embroidered with tiny snowflake patterns stitched during the long evenings of fall. Each place setting is laid with care mismatched plates that somehow form a perfect whole. The father places a wooden bowl of apples at the centre and steps back to admire the arrangement. When everyone gathers at the table, the room swells with warmth and anticipation. The family pauses to offer gratitude, each voice adding a quiet phrase. Children smile shyly, not fully understanding the solemnity, but aware that this moment holds meaning. Then the meal begins. Laughter rises as dishes pass from hand to hand. The roasted chicken disappears quickly, followed by spoonfuls of potatoes, beans, and biscuits. Someone spills a little gravy, and the mother chuckles instead of scolding. It is a day of grace. Across the table, the neighbour tells a story about a winter years ago, when the snow fell so heavily they had to shovel paths from one house to another just to share supper. Her tale sends the children into fits of giggles, imagining tunnels through snowbanks tall as rooftops. Here and there, people introduced an offbeat little gesture, involving jokes shared at the start of the meal, believing humour warmed the spirit as surely as hot food warmed the body. Today's table carries that tradition, lightly, laughter bubbling after every shared memory. When the plates are cleared, the mother brings out the dessert, a small pie made from preserved apples, its crust slightly uneven but rich with sweetness. The children cheer, their eyes shining. Slices vanish quickly, leaving crumbs and sticky fingers behind. Even the neighbour hums with contentment as she savours her piece, closing her eyes, briefly to enjoy the treat. After the meal, the family gathers in the parlour. The father sits near the fire with a cup of coffee, the mother knits quietly beside him, and the children sprawl on the floor examining their gifts again. The neighbour helps wash dishes in the kitchen, humming a tune you recognise from last night's service. The peacefulness of the room settles over you like a soft blanket, warm and slightly drowsing. But Christmas supper does not unfold the same way in every home. You leave the farmhouse and continue into town, slipping into a row of smaller houses where families prepare their own feasts. In one home, a crowded tenement kitchen bustles with energy. Pots simmer on every available surface. Multi-generational hands chop, stir, bake, and season. Children sit on crates tasting bits of dough or swiping crumbs from cooling pans. A boy holds up a small pie triumphantly, having baked it himself under his grandmother's guidance. She pats his back with watery eyes. In another household, an immigrant family prepares dishes from their home country spices, filling the air with warmth unfamiliar to the snowy city street outside. They set extra plates at their table, following a tradition of welcoming unexpected guests. Here, friends and neighbours flow freely in and out, exchanging greetings in several languages. Certain households developed a gently humorous practice of labelling each dish with hand-drawn signs to help newcomers guess the ingredients correctly. You smile as you see a tiny card reading not as spicy as it looks perched beside a large bowl. As the afternoon deepens, you visit a more affluent home on the hill. The table gleams beneath crystal and polished silver. The turkey is large, its skin shining with butter. Brightly coloured candies in tiny dishes contrast with the white linen. Here, the meal unfolds with refined conversation talk of travel business and winter social events. Yet even amid formality, warmth. Flickers a mother adjusting her daughter's ribbon, a father telling a quiet joke that makes the whole table pause before bursting into laughter. Just as you turn to leave, you notice a servant in the hallway carrying a tray of dishes, her shoulders heavy with fatigue. She sets the tray down and rubs her hands to warm them. Modern historians attempting to reconstruct the period's mindset disagree sharply about how festive labour affected domestic workers, whether it offered pride or only weariness. The woman takes a deep breath, squares her shoulders, and returns to the dining room carrying duty and tenderness in equal measure. Evening nears. In many homes, families gather again for smaller meals of leftovers or cups of tea. Children play with new toys. Adults share stories near the hearth. In one parlour, a grandmother leads her family in quiet singing. In another, someone reads from a storybook by lamplight. Snow begins to fall again, thicker now, blanketing rooftops, muffling footsteps, and softening the world into a peaceful hush. You step outside and look across the landscape windows, glowing chimneys exhaling, families settling into contented calm. Christmas Day edges slowly toward night, and with it your long wander through 1900 America begins its gentle fade. The snow drifts more softly now, as though the world itself exhales into rest. The warmth from distant windows settles into a muted glow, each faint golden square a tiny promise of comfort stretching across the quiet evening. You stand at the edge of a long road dusted in white, letting silence expand around you, smoothing the edges of the day into something featherlight. Your steps slow, then soften, then nearly disappear entirely as you walk with no urgency. The sky deepens into a velvety blue, and the first stars appear calm and unhurried. Their light seems older than anything you've witnessed tonight, yet somehow gentler too, guiding your gaze upward in a long easing breath. Somewhere far behind you, families are settling into bed lamps being lowered, blankets pulled warm around shoulders, fires reduced to ruby embers that glow steadily in the hush. Their voices drift upward as barely there murmurs soft fragments of good-night wishes melting into the air like quiet prayers. You keep walking until even the faint hum of life grows still. Only the soft crunch of snow beneath your feet remains, and slowly even that sound fades, replaced by a peaceful awareness that the world has slipped into its deepest lull of the year. Allow the quiet to wrap itself around you now. Let the cold night soften into gentle calm. Feel the weight of your body ease downward as though settling into a warm, familiar bed. Let your breath slow, filling the space between heartbeats, with a sense of calm so steady it feels like drifting. The day has ended, the candles have dimmed, and in this moment all is still. Sleep follows easily now, like snow falling through lamplight.